Chapter 586. Fourth day. The 1,000-foot-long shadow of the mountain of ice and fire in the pool was now less than 100 feet wide. It was like the translucent membrane within an eggshell, ready to shatter at any moment. And what was astonishing was that the mountain shadow was still sinking, as if this pool were a bottomless abyss. Chinyu sat down cross-legged. His eyes pierced through the thin barrier, and he could clearly see what was happening outside. The deeper he went, the richer the color of the pool became. It was like countless drops of blood had been simmered down. The rich scarlet color actually formed a soul-stirring beauty. It was like an endless sea of resurrection lilies, tumbling in the wind and stretching into the horizon. But right now, Chinyu wasn't in the mood to appreciate this beautiful scene hidden deep underground. Moreover, he was well aware that once the final barrier was corroded and shattered, the beautiful scenery in front of him would instantly eat him up without leaving a single trace. Although his life was far longer and more wonderful than he had imagined it to be, Chinyu still hadn't accepted the reality that he was about to die. He was going to die. He was really going to die. There were still many things he hadn't done. There were still many wishes he hadn't fulfilled, but thinking about these things was meaningless. He just didn't know, if he died here, would there be anyone in this world who would shed a tear for him? His lips twitched several times, finally turning into bitterness. So deep in his bones, he was also a very sentimental person. To think that he would think of such things. Indeed, in the face of death, all living things would appear. Chinyu somewhat admired Shen Yuanin. Her calmness wasn't faked. He had no idea just what she had experienced, that she could calmly face life and death. His waist relaxed, and he fell to the ground. Chinyu's eyes were wide open as he gasped for breath, as if he wanted to vent all the depression that had accumulated in his heart. Shen Yuanin opened her eyes. After several breaths of silence, she said, "Have we met before?" With death approaching, she didn't want to leave this world with doubts in her heart. If it weren't for this, she wouldn't have asked. Chinyu didn't stand up, nor did he look up. I and the palace master first met in the sea of purgatory. He suddenly paused and shook his head. Since things have come to this, there is no need to hide it anymore. The truth is that Yao Bin is only an alias. My true name is Chinyu. He suddenly felt a burst of joy in his heart. To be able to speak his name out loud, especially in front of Shen Yuanin, one of the three giants of the immortal sect, was a very good feeling. Chinyu? Shen Yuanin whispered. His eyes blurred, and deep in his soul, he felt his heart race. A trace of paleness appeared on her face. Her brows furrowed for a long time before they slowly relaxed. I feel like I recognize you. Chinyu's eyebrows arched up. Palace Master, have you never heard of my name in the immortal sect? The events that occurred in Four Seasons City had caused an uproar, and it could be said that everyone under the heavens knew of them. Shen Yuanin shook her head. I don't care about matters of the sect. With her cold personality, this was actually quite normal. Chinyu bitterly smiled inwardly. Most of the happiness he felt just now had dissipated. So it turned out that from start to finish, these people didn't know just what sort of character he was. He turned around and looked at Shen Yuanin's calm appearance. Indignation rose in his heart. If Palace Master doesn't know, then I will tell you. Regardless of whether she was willing or not, Chinyu began to speak. The story of the lowly boy from the land of exiles and the proud daughter of Heaven Senior Apprentice Sister. It was a long story of knowing each other, of being separated for many years, and finally, after entering the land of divinity and demons, they were reunited in the infinite realm. I thought that my suffering would eventually pass, but who knew that great Elder Purple Moon would prepare such a great gift for me? Even the self-detonation of yin and yang energies wasn't able to kill me. I think she must have been surprised. After saying so much, was it really because he was ignored by Shen Yuanin? Perhaps it was even more because he was unwilling to part with her, He was unwilling to part with the person he spoke of, unwilling to part with her forever. Shen Yuanin had been silent the entire time. She shook her head. Honorable Master isn't a cruel and ruthless person. She must have had her own difficulties. Chinyu's eyebrows arched up. Palace Master doesn't suspect that I am slandering you. You wouldn't. These three simple words caused Yu to pause for several breaths of time. He let out a long breath and said, "With Palace Master status, it is truly unexpected that you would trust me so much. I won't hide it from Palace Master. I originally planned to wait until I succeeded the throne of the Holy Monarch and wield the authority of the demonic path. Then, I wouldn't hesitate to pay any price to retaliate against the immortal sect. Regardless of whether or not Great Elder Purple Moon had her own difficulties in her actions, from my standpoint, she is an enemy that will never rest until she is dead. Of course, I no longer have the chance to take revenge on her." He gently sighed, a bit disappointed. Shen Yuanin frowned. "As you said, Ningling is a disciple that Honorable Master values highly. Honorable Master even had thoughts of raising her to become the next sect master. But there is no trace of her in my memories. What did Palace Master do in her early years?" Shen Yuanin was silent for a moment. "Seclusion." That's right. She seemed to have been in seclusion all this time, perceiving the sublime lost emotion code. Only when she made a breakthrough did she leave seclusion and succeed the throne of Palace Master. Yu nodded. "Palace Master has been in seclusion for many years, so it's normal that you don't know what is happening in the outside world. It hasn't been too many years since Ningling entered the immortal sect and disappeared." He bitterly smiled. "There is no way for me to take revenge now. I can only hope that Great Elder Purple Moon isn't a cruel and merciless person and can give Ningling a path to survival. Even if he was about to die, he still hoped that Ningling could live a good life somewhere in the world. It would be best if she never learned that he had died. To put oneself in her shoes and consider everything for her sake, perhaps this was true love. Unfortunately, his luck was poor. In the end, he didn't have the chance to live a life hand in hand with Ningling. Even though he struggled and worked hard for all these years, he still met a tragic end. Yu couldn't help but think that if he hadn't worked so hard and hadn't come to this world, if he had stayed in that barren land of exiles, would Ningling not have encountered such an accident? Perhaps he wouldn't have lost his life so early? Of course, these were all meaningless thoughts. Yu didn't have any intention of gathering them. In these past years, he had lived a sufficiently calm and cautious life. Now that he was about to die, what did it matter if he indulged himself a little? In a trance, his thoughts drifted far away. Across from him, Shen Yuanin lowered her head, as if she were also thinking about something. However, her complexion seemed much paler than before. Although they didn't explicitly say it, the two of them were well aware that they were strangers to begin with. Although they had experienced some things together, they didn't have many common topics to talk about. Moreover, on the edge of death, who would be in the mood to waste their breath? They might as well save their strength. Without accident, the two of them would remain silent like this until the final moment arrived. But the matters of the world were always unpredictable. Just as Yu accepted his fate and waited for death, an accident suddenly appeared in front of him. The crimson color in front of him had been separated at some unknown time, replaced by a pure black color. It was like a deep sea, cold and silent. Yu blinked his eyes. He blinked again and again. Then, he determined that he wasn't hallucinating. A trace of joy drilled out from the depths of his heart. He didn't fear any changes. He feared nothing would change. The situation had already reached this step, so how could it possibly worsen? He quickly stood up and took several steps forwards. Then, he leaned against the inner wall of the barrier and stared at the black color that had appeared outside. Soon after, the ground beneath his feet shook. The barrier formed from ice and fire slowly stopped sinking, falling where the crimson and black colors met. Yu closed his eyes and sent out his divine sense. After several breaths of time, he opened his eyes, his face filled with joy. The heavens would never bar one's way. The heavens would never bar one's way. The black color that appeared in the depths of the hot spring was an unknown cold energy. It was the complete opposite of the crimson color. It belonged to the two extremes of yin and yang. Although he didn't know why this situation would appear, it wasn't important. What was important was that yin and yang blended together, counteracting each other's destructive attributes. The terrifying corrosion that the barrier had suffered had already disappeared. In other words, as long as they stayed between the black and crimson colors, they wouldn't be in any danger for the time being. After escaping from death, even with Qin Yu's calm temperament, he couldn't help but laugh out loud, his voice filled with joy. Accepting one's fate and being willing to die were two completely different things. If there was a slim chance of survival, no one would give it up. As he said before, as long as a person was alive, there were infinite possibilities. Crimson and black colors pierced through the thin barrier and shined on Qin Yu's body, dyeing him two different colors. As the two colors reflected against each other, he suddenly frowned. He felt as if he had forgotten something. Extreme yin, extreme cold. He seemed to have heard something similar not too long ago. He lifted a hand and slapped between his eyebrows. Joy lit up his eyes. He turned his hand, and a seed appeared in his palm. Its surface was gray and without any markings, no different from stone. This was the seed he had obtained from Yuya when he was in Ing Capital's capital city barracks. Because this seed was related to his strange, sudden inspiration, he had asked the little blue lamp to help him appraise it. This is indeed a seed. It needs to be in a place where extreme yin and extreme yang meet in order to hatch. Before he could finish speaking, Emperor Chu's divine sense swept out. But these words were firmly engraved in Qin Yu's heart. So when he saw the crimson and black colors confronting each other, and that they were two attributes of extreme yin and extreme cold, he suddenly thought of this. Wasn't this the so-called extreme yin and extreme cold meet in a place where yin and yang meet? Qin Yu looked at the seed calmly lying in his palm, his eyes growing increasingly bright. No wonder he had inexplicably been aroused by this sudden inspiration. Although he hadn't verified it yet, Qin Yu's intuition told him that if he could survive this calamity, the turning point would lie on this seed. Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu lifted his hand and loosened it. The seed touched the barrier. Like a stone falling into water, it directly passed through and was exposed between the black and crimson colors. Like cold water being poured into a pot of boiling oil, it immediately stirred up a violent reaction. The peaceful coexistence of extreme yin and extreme cold instantly erupted. Bang! A vortex appeared, the core of which was the seed. The rampaging extreme yin and extreme cold wildly spun along the vortex before finally fusing into the seed. Cracks suddenly appeared on its gray surface. They were extremely small and weak, but they caused Qin Yu's mind to tighten. Luckily, it was just a false alarm. The seed's surface shattered into powder that fell to the ground, gradually revealing its true appearance. On the surface of the purple gold, runes began to grow. They were originally dim, but now they seemed to come to life, erupting with a brilliant divine light. When the seed's gray surface completely fell off, although it had shrunk by a size, it had become dazzling. In particular, as the runes on its surface lit up, the aura it released was vast and boundless, as if it contained millions of changes and trillions of karmic causes and effects. It seemed to cover everything in the world, unable to tolerate anything. Tao Spirit. Shen Yuanin's eyes widened. Her calm and indifferent voice revealed clear shock. Qin Yu hurriedly asked, "Does Palace Master recognize this?" Shen Yuanin didn't reply. She earnestly looked at it for a long time and then let out a long breath. "Yes, it is indeed a Tao spirit." Her eyes fell on Qin Yu. "Because of my cultivation, I inadvertently learned that there is a spirit fruit in this world called the Great Tao. It hatches in 100 years, blooms in 100 years, and bears fruit in 100 years. It contains the profound rules of the world, and if one swallows it, they can immediately become a calamity, immortal. The Great Tao fruit is not something that can be planted by humans. Its seed is called a Tao spirit, and it is bred by the heavens and earth. For such a precious treasure of the heavens and earth, it would take countless years for it to form. Moreover, a Tao spirit has an ordinary appearance and doesn't reveal any aura at all. Even if someone were to obtain it, they might not be able to discover the good fortune it contains. Moreover, a Tao spirit needs to be in a land of yin and yang in order to hatch and grow. Although the world is vast, there are only a few places that can satisfy these conditions. All of these difficulties have already determined how difficult it is for the great Tao fruit to appear. Thus, it only takes a short 300 years for it to form. It isn't that it isn't difficult to breed it, but that all of the difficulties are concentrated before the Tao spirit hatches. This was the first time she had spoken so much since they met. Her words flowed endlessly, and it could be imagined that her emotions were violently fluctuating right now. Even Qin Yu never imagined that this seed would have such an astonishing origin. The great Tao fruit could be swallowed, and one could immediately become a calamity immortal. There was no need for more. Just this alone was enough to cause all the cultivators of the world to go crazy. The great Tao was emotionless. The further one walked on the road of cultivation, the more difficult each step became. Looking at the trillions of lives in the world, all of them bitterly struggled to cultivate. But just how many people could truly become a calamity immortal and reach the peak of a world? As his mind shook, Qin Yu's expression changed unpredictably. He didn't notice that across from him, Shun Yuanin's complexion was becoming increasingly pale and translucent. Then, she spat out a mouthful of blood, and a terrifying cold energy erupted. Palace Master, Shun Yuanin's eyes dimmed. To be able to obtain a Tao spirit and even successfully activate it in a life or death situation, you do have a great destiny, but we cannot wait 300 years. I am sorry. She fell backwards. A layer of frost appeared on the surface of her body, covering her eyelashes and long hair. Qin Yu's heart shrank. Whatever great Tao fruit, he tossed all thoughts of it to the back of his mind. He stepped forwards and held her in his arms. A bone-chilling cold erupted from within her, constantly invading her body. But Qin Yu didn't care about this at all. He probed her body with his aura. Shin Yuanin's voice became weak. Because of my cultivation method, even though I have extinguished all emotions and desires, I still feel awe towards death. The reason I was calm was because I already knew that whether or not I was trapped here, I would still die. Looking at Qin Yu's gloomy complexion, her eyes dimmed. It is indeed because of me that I ruined your monstrous lucky chance. Otherwise, if you obtained the great Tao fruit, you might have had a chance to escape. In my life, I have never owed anyone anything but you. Qin Yu shouted out loud. Shut up. I won't let you die. Listen clearly, I won't let you die. There was only worry in his words, not anger at all. Shin Yuanin was stunned. Then, she gently sighed. I really feel like I've seen you somewhere before. I keep feeling that you look familiar. Before she finished speaking, she closed her eyes. The strength that had gone berserk had completely gone out of control. In an instant, ice and snow spread over Qin Yu's body. His face paled. His eyes fell onto Shun Yuanin's face. This woman's lips were slightly curled up. Was she smiling? She could actually smile. This woman that was cold to the point of freezing could actually smile in the face of death. Qin Yu's heart fiercely shrank, as if a giant hand was gripping it. It was so uncomfortable that he couldn't breathe. I didn't tell you, but in truth, I also feel that we know each other. Shin Yuanin, I still haven't investigated you. Just who are you, and how can you so easily shake my mind? How can you die? You absolutely cannot die. He gathered strength in his arms and held her in his arms. The demon body revolved to the limit and billowing heat erupted. At the same time, Qin Yu clenched his teeth and roared out, "Little blue lamp." He couldn't care about anything else. There was only a single thought in his mind, and that was that he could not allow Shun Yuanin to die. The great Tao fruit could immediately allow one to become a calamity immortal. It contained great good fortune of the heavens and earth. It could definitely save her. He couldn't wait for 300 years, but he had a method to shorten this time. Between the black and crimson, the world suddenly collapsed inward and the phantom of a great sun descended. But it didn't do anything. It only remained silent, looking at Qin Yu. I know that this place contains a great secret, and summoning you out is inappropriate, but I have no other choice. Qin Yu said in a low voice. I want to save her. Just consider it as me begging you. The great sun phantom sent out a thought fluctuation. I will do my best, but whether or not she can last until the great Tao fruit ripens will depend on her own good fortune. Shua, the great sun phantom appeared. Light sprinkled down from the vortex where the Tao spirit was, covering it within. The runes on its surface suddenly became even brighter. They trembled and hummed as if they were cheering. The power of extreme yin and extreme yang was galvanized, forming a vortex that rapidly expanded. Round after round, the range of the vortex rapidly expanded. After several breaths of time, it filled the entire field of vision, having expanded by 100 times. This meant that the growth of the great Tao fruit had been accelerated by 100 times. It only needed 3 years. This speed was astonishing enough. But there wasn't the least bit of joy on Qin Yu's face. With Shen Yuanin's current condition, how could she last for 3 years? As if it knew what he was thinking, the little blue lamp's thoughts fluctuated. This is the limit of what I can do right now. Qin Yu said in a low voice, Is there any other way? After several breaths of silence. There is. But you must understand that to do extraordinary things requires extraordinary methods. If you want to save someone, you will be in danger. Even if the barrier around you breaks, I still have a way to ensure your safety for 3 years. Qin Yu, you must consider this carefully. If he abandoned Shen Yuanin and obtained the great Tao fruit 3 years later, he could immediately reach the calamity immortal realm. He might even have a chance to escape from the sea of purgatory. On one side was a shining future filled with infinite vitality. On the other side, he didn't know if she was dead or alive, but the dangers were endless. Qin Yu decisively said, I want to save her. The feeling this woman gave him was becoming more and more different. He didn't know why, but his intuition told him that if he allowed Shen Yuanin to die, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The little blue lamp didn't try to dissuade him again. It directly gave him a solution. My strength is limited right now. I need to draw support from external forces to increase my strength. To do this, I will need to sacrifice your lifespan. In addition, although the Tao spirit is tough, if the strength it absorbs surpasses its limit, it will still collapse. I will need to draw out your blood essence to strengthen its ability to withstand this. Qin Yu nodded. I can withstand it. The great sun's void image trembled, releasing dazzling radiance. A portion of it separated, condensing into the void image of an altar. 2 beams of light shot out from the altar phantom. One connected to the great sun phantom, and the other shined on Qin Yu's body. His body suddenly stiffened, and he let out a muffled groan. His forehead was instantly covered with fine beads of sweat. Although he was prepared, the pain of sacrificing his lifespan was like having all the marrow in his body extracted. All living beings in the world had a limit to their lifespans. To be precise, lifespan should be referred to as vitality. This type of power was formless and immaterial. It was one with living beings, supporting them as they traveled between heaven and earth. When its life force was exhausted, it would die. At this time, Qin Yu could clearly feel his life fading away. A faint chill rose up from deep within his heart. Bang! The vortex that had swelled to 100 times its original size suddenly expanded once more. With a loud rumble, it swept up the scarlet and black colors, transforming into a world-shaking tide. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to a shocking size of 1,000 times. In the center of the vortex, the speed at which the Tao spirit absorbed the power of extreme yin and extreme yang also increased by 10 times. The runes on its surface grew brighter and brighter, almost surpassing that of the great sun, making it impossible to look directly at. Ka-cha, ka-cha, a small sound spread out from within the Tao spirit, like gears grinding against each other. The little blue lamp sighed. The Tao spirit cannot withstand 1,000-fold acceleration. Qin Yu clenched his teeth and roared, Take my blood essence. Another beam of light fell down. Qin Yu subconsciously looked up, blue veins sticking out from his neck. After that pure white light touched his body, it immediately turned scarlet red. It was like a blood vessel condensed from light, drawing Qin Yu's boundless blood essence into the vortex. Drip, drip, like drops of water falling from the eaves after the rain. Dark red beads of blood condensed on the other side of the light and fell onto the Tao spirit. The shockingly hot furnace needed to release heat, otherwise it would explode. To the Tao spirit, these dripping beads of blood were like cooling water. The speed at which it absorbed the power of extreme yin and extreme yang didn't slow down at all. Instead, the brightness released by the runes slowed down by a great deal, and the sounds of collisions within also gradually subsided. But this was the result that Qin Yu had exchanged for with his life. Sacrificing his lifespan and extracting his blood essence. Any one of these was a horrifying torture, and now he was withstanding it. Not to mention whether or not he could withstand it. Just this terrifying pain alone was enough to cause his will to collapse if his mind wasn't firm. At that time, his soul would wither away. Even if his mortal body didn't die, the truth was that he would die. 100 days from now, the Tao fruit will be formed. After the little blue lamp sent out this thought fluctuation, it fell into a long period of silence. Qin Yu was well aware that it was extremely dissatisfied. He felt a bit guilty, but he had no other choice in this matter. Qin Yu looked down at Ning Ling, who was covered in ice and snow. The faint smile on her lips was even more breathtaking than before. "Don't die. We all don't want to die," she whispered. Her voice was blurred by the pain, turning into fragmented syllables. 100 days. Qin Yu didn't know if he could withstand it. As he felt his consciousness gradually blur from the pain, he said in his heart, "Undying, if you wake up, please help me and let her continue to live." After an unknown period of time, Qin Yu's field of vision fell into darkness. Even so, his body instinctively twitched. Deep within the hot spring, between the crimson and black waters, a giant vortex spun and roared, rumbling and shaking the heavens and earth. Time passed. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Chapter 587. As for what death was, unless one personally experienced it, it was hard to say. Shen Yuanyin felt as if she had sunk into a pitch-black sea, icy cold and quiet. Her consciousness was clear, but she had forgotten who she was, where she came from, and what she had experienced. She couldn't feel the existence of her body and was powerless to struggle. She could only allow herself to sink, little by little. The deep sea outside became increasingly cold. A chill seeped in, and her consciousness gradually froze. Shen Yuanyin understood. Perhaps when her consciousness was completely frozen and unable to move, that would be the moment of her death. She couldn't resist it. But every time her consciousness was about to freeze, she would hear a voice. "Don't die. None of you can die. Who was it?" Shen Yuanyin couldn't remember. But this voice seemed to contain an invisible magic that stimulated her potential every time. It became increasingly cold, and she lost the ability to think. But her consciousness remained, maintaining the last trace of vitality. This was because she suddenly discovered that she couldn't bear to part with this voice, and she also wanted to know just who was the one who spoke these words, "Don't die. None of you can die." The person who spoke these words must be lonely and helpless. "I can't die, because only by living can I accompany him." But just who was he? Who am I? In the pitch-black deep sea, time lost all meaning. It was like thousands, tens of thousands of years had passed, an incomparably long period of time. Suddenly, in that calm and tranquil deep sea, fluctuations began to appear. It came from above her head, becoming increasingly strong. It was unknown what was happening. In the next moment, Shen Yuanyin's sinking body seemed to be grabbed by an invisible hand and pulled upwards. The icy cold began to fade. Her blurry consciousness began to gradually awaken. The crimson and black vortex wove together. It was still spinning, but its area had returned to its original size. It was no longer as vast and mighty as before. At the center of it was no longer a Tao spirit, but an ancient tree. Its winding branches exuded the aura of endless years. This aura of time wasn't because it had existed for a long time, but because it was born from a seed. A Tao spirit was bred by the heavens and earth. Only after countless years could it become a Tao spirit. But now this ancient tree seemed to have lost all vitality. Its leaves were yellow and filled with death energy. Not too far away from the ancient dying tree, between the barrier of ice and fire, Qin gently placed Shun Yuanin on the ground. Her face was flushed with blood, and her chest was rising and falling. It was clear that she had escaped from the clutches of the Grim Reaper. The power of the Tao fruit was healing her injuries. It wouldn't be long before she woke up. The corners of Qin Yu's lips lifted up in a smile. His withered skin and layers of wrinkles squeezed together, adding a bit of desolate twilight to his appearance. 100 days of sacrificing his longevity and extracting his blood essence had turned him into a white-haired old man. An aura of decay filled his body, but his face was calm and placid. He did not consider whether it was worth it or not, because compared to death, the price he paid was nothing. Shen Yuanin had come back to life. Just this alone was enough. The phantom of the great sun floated above the ancient tree. Its thoughts fluctuated. Your current state is very poor. Don't waste any more time. Qin Yu smiled. Understand. Thank you for this time. He hesitated for a moment and then wrote down a few words on the ground. He had only used a tiny bit of strength, but his chest violently shook and his face paled. Finally, he couldn't suppress it any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. The great sun phantom coldly coughed. A bright beam of light howled out, wrapping around Qin Yu and pulling him out of the barrier. As he fell onto the withered and dying ancient tree, its rough and cracked skin suddenly turned soft, as if it were mud that slowly swallowed up his body. For a woman, you have tossed yourself into such a situation. How stupid. The great sun phantom stared at the still unconscious Shun Yuanin in the barrier. An icy cold aura appeared, but after a moment of silence, it didn't do anything. Like a shadow, it vanished from sight. Shun Yuanin opened her eyes. After a brief daze, countless memories gushed out from deep within her mind. She remembered her identity and knew her current situation. She also thought of the voice that she heard in her death. Qin Yu. She fiercely stood up and swept her eyes around. She could see through the small barrier with a single glance. She was the only one here. That man had disappeared without a trace. Where'd he go? Shen Yuanin saw the ancient dying tree outside the barrier. She could feel the boundless strength within her that still hadn't been completely absorbed. Her expression became absent-minded and her eyes filled with confusion. Although she didn't know what happened afterwards, for what she saw in front of her in her resurrection, she could guess many, many things. That man whose whereabouts were unknown, after she fell into the deep sea of death, had used some unknown method to allow the Tao spirit to germinate and bear fruit in a short 100 days. He had even fed it to her. A throbbing feeling spread out from the depths of her soul. It didn't dissipate, but as time passed, it became increasingly strong. Finally, it turned into a tide that swept through her mind, shattering all of her restraint and coldness. Shen Yuanin's cold eyes turned red. Faint traces of water vapor gathered, forming some sort of warm liquid. The fruit of the great Tao was a transcendent lucky chance that a cultivator could immediately become a tribulation immortal. It was enough to make anyone in the world go crazy for it. Qin Yu had given it to her to bring her back to life. Where are you? Come out, come out. Shen Yuanin screamed. Her voice echoed through the barrier, but she was destined to receive no response. This was an extremely deep part of the hot spring. Outside, there was a terrifying power of extreme and extreme cold that was enough to kill a tribulation immortal. Where could Qin Yu go? Inexplicable panic, fear, pain, all of it gushed out from the depths of her heart. Her eyes became increasingly sour, blurring her vision. She already had a judgment in her heart, but she didn't dare to believe it. This was because there was no reason for all of this. There was no need for him to do such a thing for her. Suddenly, the words on the ground fell into her line of sight. But right now, Shen Yuanin couldn't care about what was written on the ground. All of her eyes fell onto the dark red bloodstain. She slowly squatted down and touched the surface of the bloodstain with her fingers. In the next moment, she couldn't hold back her tears any longer. They fell down her cheeks, shattering into pieces as they hit the ground. Although the blood had already dried up, Shen Yuanin could still feel Qin Yu's aura from it. Old, decaying, dying, there was also the unconcealable exhaustion. Because she had experienced death, she was even more sensitive to this scent. This blood was filled with the scent of death. Qin Yu had died, he had died. Shen Yuanin could no longer lie to herself. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth. Intense fluctuations of emotions erupted from the depths of her heart. In her mind, the fragments of images that had appeared and then vanished began to tumble out once more. She concentrated all of her concentration on these fragments. The backlash of the sublime lost emotion code appeared once more, but Shen Yuanin didn't care. Finally, in the countless tumbling memory fragments, she found a smiling face. He was sitting in a pavilion, holding a jar of wine in his hands. He was incomparably happy, his eyebrows filled with joy. With a stuffy cough, blood flowed down from the corners of her lips. Shen Yuanin paled. The two faces weren't the same, but when placed together, one would discover that their facial features overlapped perfectly. Qin Yu. It was Qin Yu. They really had crossed paths before. How could she forget him? What was her honorable master hiding from her? 10 days later, Shen Yuanin stepped out from the mountain shadow. The barrier of fire and water that had been maintained to the limit behind her quietly shattered. She paused but didn't look back. Her aura broke through the crimson power of extreme yang and rushed above the hot spring. Her expression became increasingly faint and her eyes even colder. At this time, Shen Yuanin's sublime lost emotion code was flawless. It had entered a perfect boundary. But in the deepest depths of her eyes, in a place that no one could reach, there was a deep sorrow. The message on the ground tumbled through her mind. When we meet again in the future, I hope that Palace Master can help me with a matter and resolve the confusion in my heart. There might have been more, but they were interrupted by the blood. When we meet again in the future, you will already be dead. That person, even when death arrived and his body turned to ash, he still wanted to hide it from her. To comfort her, Qin Yu, I don't know who you are or what you have experienced with me, but in this life, I will never, ever forget you. Several months later, in the forbidden area of Nine Heaven Mirror Moon Palace, the divine crystal throne trembled. Fluctuations spread throughout the immortal sect. Another 10 days passed. On this day, the winds and clouds changed. The master of the lucid nether realm and the Buddha-bone lord arrived together. News of this was tightly locked down, and no one knew what had happened. After the Chu emperor negotiated with the two immortal sect giants, he returned to the imperial palace. On this day, there was a strange movement in Ing Capital's Great Array formation, as if it were unstable. Outside Ing Capital, Shen Yuanin's face was thin and her aura was icy cold. She looked at the excited Great Elder Purple Moon and asked, "Honorable Master, may I ask if you know a man named Qin Yu?" Purple Moon instantly stiffened. Time passed year by year. Although news of the demonic paths, Saint Sun, perishing caused a brief sensation, the dead had no value. It soon became a thing of the past, and no one paid any attention to it. Mulimo appeared in front of everyone once more. It was said that after he had tempered himself, his cultivation had made tremendous progress. His demon body cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he wasn't too far away from the Emperor realm. The Mu family that had been in a state of panic seemed to have passed through a crisis. The disciples were restored to their former arrogance. Wuma Sijan had returned from the sea of purgatory. Although he had suffered heavy injuries, he had obtained some formidable lucky chance that no one could speak of. After 2 years of seclusion, he broke into the Calamity Immortal Realm and regained the title of the #1 powerhouse of the younger generation, the elder senior apprentice brother. because Wuma Sijan was far too dazzling. The other two rapidly growing disciples of the younger generation seemed unremarkable at all. They were Dong Hanju and Sun Zifu. In particular, the latter had made successive breakthroughs in several years and had a lofty momentum that seemed as if he had caught up from behind. The Holy Palace in East Sun City was now completely sealed off. Besides a small number of people that were willing to keep a festive vigor for the Saint's son, there was no longer any life here. From bustling prosperity to quiet death, this happened in less than a year. This allowed the entire demonic path to witness what it meant to be a blessing in disguise. These are just some minor matters that occurred in the demonic path. If one were to look at the entire land of divinity and demons, it would take 3 days and 3 nights to recount. The river of time rolled on. It didn't stop because someone was missing. Like this, it flowed into the unknown future. 33 RD year, Sea of Purgatory. A monster beast with compound eyes and 4 limbs was gorging itself on the ground. In front of it was the corpse of another monster beast that had been killed. The air was filled with the rich smell of blood. Although there were wounds on its body, this monster beast's eyes were sharp. It was clear that it hadn't been injured at its core. As it ate, it looked around, keeping a high vigilance. Without warning, the scales that covered the monster beast's body suddenly tightened. It seemed to sense an extremely terrifying aura. But before it could escape, there was a loud cracking sound. The monster beast's neck twisted at an exaggerated angle, and its massive body crashed to the ground. There was the sound of light footsteps. A black-robed man appeared in sight. His expression was calm, and his face was fair and handsome. Between his eyebrows, there was an indescribable sense of dignity and nobility. His slender body, handsome appearance, and breathtaking temperament were all combined into a single person. This was enough to cause the hearts of the vast majority of women in the world to sway. Although this face seemed unfamiliar, if one carefully examined it, one would find many familiar aspects of it. The black-robed man walked to the side of the monster beast's corpse. He stretched out his hand and spread open his fingers. The flesh and blood rapidly withered and drops of blood rose up, fusing into a ball of blood between his fingers. The phantom of a miniature monster beast tumbled and roared within the ball of blood, as if it were questioning the murderer as to why something as cute as it had been killed. Unfortunately, the black-robed man couldn't develop any pity for a monster beast, even if it was a beautiful mother beast. He took out a jade bottle and opened the seal. The roar of a beast immediately erupted, billowing like thunder. Slaughter, energy surged out, piercing straight into the mind. The black-robed man frowned. He tapped the surface of the jade bottle, and the roar of the beast immediately subsided. Whoosh! The bead of blood flew towards the mouth of the bottle. As it did so, it rapidly shrank and fell into the bottle. The black-robed man couldn't help but reveal a smile. In these past years, because he was bored, he had plundered many good things. Although this soul blood jade bottle couldn't be considered a peak treasure, it was actually very convenient to use. If he really couldn't leave the Sea of Purgatory, then even if he managed to survive, he would be able to ruthlessly take a bite out of the good fortune that had been cultivated a long time ago by that unknown but extremely fierce character, regardless of whether it was a mouthful or not. If he couldn't leave, Qin, you would still end up in a tragedy. Qin, you didn't want to become a tragedy, especially now. He already had the qualifications to enter the immortal sect, and Ning Ling was waiting for him outside. Chapter 588. In the extreme north, in a land of bitter cold all year round, white snow fluttered in the skies, filling one's line of sight and causing them to open their eyes. Several tents were nailed into the frozen earth. As the strong winds howled, the taut ropes emitted cracking sounds that made one's scalp tingle. Not far away, a few shepherds wearing thick fur robes that covered their heads and faces, revealing only their eyes, were doing their best to herd a flock of sheep into their tents. Hurry, the snow is getting heavier and heavier. The tall and sturdy duo Luo held two thin sheep in his arms as he struggled forwards in the wind and snow. Even though he used all of his strength, his voice still didn't travel too far. He walked in front of the tent and carefully placed the two sheep down. In this bitter cold season, he didn't dare to let them be injured, otherwise they would never be able to survive. The cold winter grew longer and longer. No one knew when it would pass. These sheep were the only food for their family to survive. Suddenly, a loud rumbling sound echoed in his ears. Duo Luo shivered and turned around to look at the skies above him. The fear of the unknown caused his face to pale. The sky, which was dark all year round and covered with thick cumulus clouds, was like a piece of soft cream that was split open by a burning red long knife. The scorching temperature caused the clouds to burn, and the falling snow below directly evaporated into nothingness. Sunlight fell onto Duo Luo's face. His eyes widened as he looked at the miraculous scene in front of him. A giant, blazing fireball cut through the skies like a comet. The flames on its surface condensed into the phantom of a heavenly phoenix. It had gorgeous feathers, a long tail, and a cold and indifferent gaze. It had an aura that disdained the world. All of this revealed its strength and nobility. In the 10th era of the Divinity and Demons era, a divine stone fell from the heavens. Starting from the northern frontier, it crossed through the land of divinity and demons and fell into the South Sea. As the stone fell, it stirred up trillions of waves, shaking the entire land of divinity and demons. Sea of Purgatory, 41st year. Qin Yu's eyes suddenly flashed open, a sharp light exploding from them. Excitement lit up his face. His aura spread outwards. The cave dwelling he was cultivating in was instantly smashed to pieces. Whoosh! His figure shot up into the skies, soaring into the heavens above him. The gray skies were like a raging sea in a storm. Clouds crazily tumbled about, emitting an aura that left one terrified. At this moment, even a towering mountain would be crushed into powder if it fell into the roiling clouds. Qin Yu didn't pause at all. He rushed straight in. The barrier around him rubbed against the destructive strength, causing blazing flames to ignite. His entire person was wrapped in a giant fireball. As he sensed it with rapt attention, wild joy lit up his face. Qin Yu didn't know what was happening outside that could cause Incapital's great array formation to shake so violently. But to him, this was undoubtedly the best chance. Blazing flames illuminated Qin Yu's face. His expression was dignified as he erupted with his divine sense. The tremors had just appeared, and the destructive power was not yet at its strongest. Wait a minute more. The tide of his heart was like the sea, synchronized with the quaking, producing wave after wave of great waves. The waves grew stronger and stronger, until several waves merged into one, forming a monstrous wave. Now, Qin Yu stepped forwards. The space beneath his feet fiercely twisted and began to rapidly collapse. His figure howled as he flew forwards like a burning meteor. He lifted a hand and punched out. His body fiercely shook, and he could hear the painful groans of his bones as they trembled. A wild strength fused into the great waves of shaking, wildly impacting the defenses of Incapital's great array formation. Kacha! A faint cracking sound spread into Qin Yu's ears. His pale face lit up with joy. Without the slightest hesitation, with a thought, his figure instantly escaped into the tear in the spell formation. The moment Qin Yu entered the crack, he paused for a moment. Then, he revealed a look of understanding. No wonder this place had become the weakest point of the array formation. From the crack, he could feel an extremely cold strength that hadn't completely dissipated yet. This strength carried with it the aura of Shun Yuanin. She had left from here. In these past years, he had searched through every nook and cranny of the Sea of Purgatory, but hadn't found a single trace left behind by Shun Yuanin. Although he had already expected that she had left, it was only now that he was able to confirm it. Only then did he truly relax. Who? A completely different aura appeared in his senses once more. Qin Yu restrained his thoughts and revealed a happy smile. Land of divinity and demons, he had finally returned. Great Chu Imperial Palace. Mi Ganyuan furrowed his eyebrows. He looked in the direction that the divine stone had fallen. The scene of the divine stone flying over Ing capital replayed in his mind. That aura was so strong that it caused one's heart to tremble. At this time, a strange fluctuation appeared in his senses. Mi Ganyuan's complexion changed. He took a step forwards and vanished from sight. When he reappeared, he was in a corner of Ing capital. Cracks appeared in the space in front of him. They immediately disintegrated, forming a giant crack. A figure rapidly flew out from within. "Who are you?" A low and deep voice carried with it an incomparably strong aura. Qin Yu frowned. He immediately recognized who this person was. This was the Great Chu Emperor, one of the world's peak super powerhouses. At this time, no matter how he tried to explain, it was useless. Qin Yu lifted a hand and thrust out a palm. Mi Ganyuan coldly shouted, "You are courting death." A terrifying fluctuation instantly erupted. It was like a mountain crashing into the heavens, crashing down. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. Qin Yu was sent tumbling backwards. He spat out a mouthful of blood and instantly vanished from sight. Mi Ganyuan flicked his sleeves. "Stay behind." Everywhere he looked, space began to twist. The strength of Ing Capital's Great Array formation had already been mobilized. Not too far away, space shattered. Qin Yu staggered out, his face even paler than before. The Chu Emperor's strength was unrivaled under the heavens, and he also had the support of Ing Capital's Great Array formation. He absolutely could not be defeated. Qin Yu turned and continued to flee without a single word. Behind him, the Chu Emperor's expression darkened. Deep in his eyes, there was an increasingly cold light. This cultivator was extremely unfamiliar. He had never heard of him before, but his strength was actually astonishing. Although he could only flee in distress in front of him, even with the Chu Emperor's cultivation superimposed upon the might of Ing Capital's Great Array formation, he still wasn't able to kill him. Looking at the world, just how many people could do this? And most importantly, this cultivator had broken through Ing Capital's Great Array formation and escaped from the sea of purgatory. That person from the immortal sect had an incomparably precious status. Even though he was the Chu Emperor, he still couldn't do anything to her. Today, this cultivator was the best chance to resolve his doubts. Ing Capital, Mi Ganyuan shouted out loud. The entire might of the Great Array formation was gathered together. In his battle with Emperor Zhou, Ing Capital had been severely damaged and countless people had died in the city. Today, he would not allow such a thing to happen again. Feeling the thick air and the terrifying aura that began to condense in the skies, Qin Yu shouted out loud, "Undying." In terms of escaping, of course he was stronger, but this bastard was actually watching from the sidelines. All around Qin Yu, space began to collapse inch by inch. It formed a giant black mouth that swallowed his figure. The Chu Emperor revealed a shocked and angry expression. "Suppress." The giant black mouth that was about to close twisted for a moment before vanishing from sight. The entire Ing Capital was shrouded in the anger of the Chu Emperor. His complexion paled. With his cultivation and the strength of the Great Array formation, this person had actually escaped. Just who was this cultivator? Hashtag, 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 hashtag. Chapter 589. Blue waves surged, stretching for tens of thousands of miles. The clouds were light and the wind was light. The sun was just right. Without warning, strong winds rose up, ruffling the calm sea in front of them. Rumble, rumble. As the waves roared, the space beneath the skies exploded from within. A black-robed figure staggered out. He spat out a mouthful of blood and then violently coughed. He swept his eyes around and his eyebrows relaxed, revealing a relaxed expression. Luckily, although the spatial fluctuations had been disrupted, his destination was still the land of divinity and demons. He was truly worried that he would be sent to some unimaginably dangerous place again. This black-robed figure was Qin Yu, who had escaped from the hands of the Chu Emperor. Although he had fled in a distressed manner, there were countless cultivators in the world. Those that could face the Chu Emperor, activate Ing City's Great Array formation, and then escape unscathed could be counted on one hand. Qin Yu suppressed the tumbling in his chest and smiled. Although his injuries weren't heavy, it was always better to be cautious. He had just achieved large success in his divine art, so he didn't want to fail miserably. Bang! His figure rapidly sank, like a stone falling into the sea, vanishing from sight. Black clouds piled up, thick and heavy, blocking out the skies. Thunder roared within, and a torrential rain fell. A 10,000-foot ship bobbed up and down in the turbulent waves. Countless short-sleeved sailors ran across the deck, their shouts drowned out by the great waves. On the balcony outside the control room, a petite figure held onto the railing as she looked at the raging sea, her face calm. The rain soaked through her dress, and the fabric clung to her body, revealing her alluring figure. Several people behind her lowered their heads, not daring to glance at her. She seemed like a charming woman, but no one dared to underestimate her if she could become the captain. Moreover, Madame C's ominous reputation had spread far and wide. In these past years, many people had tried to swallow her whole, but none of them had a good ending. "Pass down my order. Lower the anchor." The woman's voice was cold, filled with the dignity of a superior. The subordinate hurriedly responded. He turned and left, his body as nimble as a monkey as he rapidly moved forward on the shaking ship. Soon, there was a loud rumbling sound as the capstan turned. The bow and stern of the ship had two anchors that rapidly sank to the seabed, stabilizing the hull. But the situation was still not optimistic. The storm showed no signs of dissipating. Rather, it became increasingly terrifying. The ship had already begun to groan as if it couldn't bear the burden. If this continued, it wouldn't be able to escape its fate of breaking apart. On the balcony, the woman was silent. She gripped the railing so tightly that her hands turned white. On the deck, the sailors no longer cared about the cargo, desperately holding themselves in place, their faces filled with fear. Just as the disaster was about to befall them, the thick and boundless black clouds above their heads disappeared like mist under the scorching sun. The wind dissipated, and the waves calmed down. The sea that had been as cruel as a tyrant a moment ago was now as docile as a sheep. A group of cultivators appeared in midair with cold expressions. They were like gods looking down at the people on the ship with faces filled with shock. Several days ago, a huge fireball fell from the sky. Part of it landed in this sea. Did any of you witness it? A cultivator spoke. His voice was activated by his powerful cultivation base, and it blasted into everyone's ears, causing their hearts to tremble incessantly. The sailors with weaker cultivations screamed miserably as blood flowed out of their ears and they fainted. Madame Hai's face was pale. She suppressed her fear and bowed. "I greet the exalted immortals. About 5 days ago, there was indeed a fireball that fell from the sky and headed towards the southeast. But my cultivation is too weak to investigate. I ask the exalted immortals to understand." In midair, the group of cultivators revealed looks of pleasant surprise. It seemed that their calculations weren't wrong. There was indeed a portion of the divine stones here. Amongst the crowd, it was clear that the leader was a purple-robed old man. He glanced at Madame Hai and then waved his hand. "Besides this woman, kill everyone else." This was the only group of people they had found who had witnessed the approximate range of the divine stones. Since they had obtained the information they wanted, they naturally wouldn't allow them to live, lest they be found by others. It had to be known that in this sea region, there were many people who were ordered to search for divine stones. Madame Hai paled. Exalted immortals are merciful. But who would listen to her words? An invisible strength descended, imprisoning her. In the next moment, sword light erupted. It swept across the ship like a brilliant lotus. Wherever it passed, head shot into the sky, and the stench of blood filled the air. "Put her down." An icy cold voice sounded out from behind. The purple-robed old man's complexion changed. He turned around and saw a black-robed young man standing less than 100 feet away. At such a close distance, before this person spoke, he hadn't sensed him at all. Thinking of this, the purple-robed old man's scalp tingled. He raised a hand to stop his subordinates from killing. After a moment of hesitation, he cupped his hands together and said, "I am the seventh branch of the demonic path, Acacia Paths, Chao Yunshan. May I ask who this fellow is and why are you interfering in the matters of my demonic path?" The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. "Let her go." Seeing this person avoid the important points and not dare to speak of his origins, Chao Yunshan's heart relaxed. His voice became a bit colder. "We are here on the orders of a holy land to search this sea region. Fellow Taoist is making things difficult for us for no reason. Are you challenging the dignity of the demonic path?" Hearing these words, Qin Yu felt as if he had eaten a fly. He flicked his sleeves, and with a loud bang, Chao Yunshan's face swelled up, and he was sent tumbling away. "You dare to threaten me? Even if I kill all of you, no one will say a single word for you." The solemn saint son of the demonic path would soon become the master of the holy palace. To him, the cultivators of several trivial branches were like ants to him. There was no exaggeration in his words. It was because of this that one could feel the confidence contained within. Just as anger rose in his heart, a bucket of cold water was poured over his head. Chao Yunshan paled. His intuition told him that this mysterious cultivator in front of him wasn't joking. Just who was this person? His face burned with pain. His lips twitched, and he squeezed out a smile. "Senior, please don't be angry. No matter how much courage I have, I still wouldn't dare to offend you. This is a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." He turned and scolded, "You disgraceful thing. Hurry up and release this madam." But his heart was dripping blood. He hadn't seen wrongly. Although this woman's cultivation wasn't anything special, she was a natural furnace. Right now, she was only cultivating some mediocre harvesting techniques. If she could be taught by him, she would surely become top quality in the future, and it would be greatly beneficial to her cultivation. Unfortunately, after being seen by this person, no matter how unwilling he was, he could only offer her up with both hands. One couldn't blame Chao Yunshan for thinking like this. After all, how could the high-level figures of this world have nothing better to do? Since they interfered, there had to be a goal, and this woman was the best auspicious sign. Madame Haik glanced at Qin Yu, a dazed look in her eyes. But soon, she lowered her head and flew back, a look of panic on her face. To her, this was the same as escaping the wolf's lair and then entering the tiger's mouth. She didn't even dare to imagine what the result would be. As for running away, that was no different from suicide. Chao Yunshan and the others had the strength to scatter the storm and casually kill them, much less this person in front of them who was clearly even more terrifying. Chao Yunshan dryly laughed several times. "If Senior has no other instructions, then we will bid our farewells first." Qin Yu had no expression. "Wait a moment." Chao Yunshan's smile stiffened. He cautiously asked, "What instructions does Senior have?" Qin Yu said, "You traveled tens of millions of miles to come here. What are you looking for?" Chao Yunshan's complexion changed. His fake respectful expression revealed a cruel and ruthless light. "Senior's cultivation is profound, so we don't dare to offend you. But what you're asking about involves the secrets of the demonic path. If we reveal anything, it will be difficult for us to escape cruel punishment. If Senior wants us to die, then we juniors will have no choice but to resist with our lives on the line." Qin Yu coldly snorted. His thoughts stirred and a suit of armor appeared around him. The aura of the demon body shot into the skies. The complexions of Chao Yunshan and the others changed. Their bodies shook and they bowed in the void. "We greet the Lord of the Holy Land." Whether it was the demon armor or the demon body, it was absolutely impossible to fake. The group of people paled and sweat dripped down their foreheads. Who would have thought that slaughtering a group of native cultivators would actually draw out a great figure of the Holy Land? And the most important point was that they had never seen this person before. And in addition to the previous questioning, this person seemed to know nothing at all. Although he couldn't figure out what was going on, with Qin Yu's precious status, there was absolutely no way he would be mistaken. As he thought of the previous offense, Chao Yunshan's body shook like a sieve. Luckily, this lord had only given them a warning. Otherwise, if he really killed them, they would have died in vain. Speak. Chao Yunshan didn't dare to hesitate at all. Without any hesitation, he spilled everything he knew. Qin Yu asked several questions. Although his expression didn't change, he was actually thinking in his heart. It seemed that the reason he was able to escape from the sea of purgatory was thanks to this divine stone that fell from the heavens. If Chao Yunshan was able to draw out so many forces in the land of divinity and demons to search for him, then although he didn't know what he was, he knew it was absolutely important. Qin Yu remained silent. The people that knelt down didn't dare to stand up. Their complexions became increasingly pale. Just now, it seemed that Chao Yunshan had threatened this lord again. Could it be that he was prepared to keep his promise and kill them all? Thinking of this person, the fear in everyone's hearts increased. Their eyes fell on Chao Yunshan, wishing they could tear him to pieces. Bastard, if you want to die, don't drag us down with you. Just as these people were about to collapse, Qin Yu gathered his thoughts. He could see what they were thinking and didn't bother to waste words with them. He coldly said, "Screw off." At this moment, the people from the Acacia Path truly experienced the profound meaning of escaping from the jaws of death. They nearly cried tears of joy. Chao Yunshan kowtowed again and again. Seeing Qin Yu's impatient expression, he quickly climbed up and led the group of cultivators away, soon vanishing from sight. Qin Yu shook his head, no longer bothering with these bastards. He put away his armor and restrained his aura. Then, he turned and looked at Madame Hai. Compared to the past, she was much more gentle and beautiful. She had changed into the clothes of a married woman, but between her eyebrows, there was still a sense of enchantment. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu slowed his voice and said, "It looks like you've already found someone you like, Little Hai." Madame Hai fiercely looked up. Her eyes widened with shock. Besides her dead husband, no one else knew this name. Qin Yu smiled. "What? After not seeing each other for so many years, have you forgotten about an old friend? On that stormy night in the past, you even thought of sacrificing yourself for me." As she spoke, she felt a bit of regret. She was now a married woman, and this joke was a bit inappropriate. Madame Hai looked at the strange, yet familiar face in front of her. At first glance, the strange feeling she felt rapidly magnified. "Qin Yu, you are Qin Yu." Seeing Qin Yu nod, Little Hai's eyes rapidly turned red. Large drops of tears fell down her cheeks. She suddenly threw herself at Qin Yu and tightly hugged him. Her heart broke as she cried. Although he didn't know what Little Hai had experienced, when he heard her cry, Qin Yu felt his heart ache for a moment. In the past, this girl had saved his life. When they parted, she had smiled happily, filled with longing for the future. But now, Qin Yu reached out and hugged her. He patted Little Hai's back and said in a low voice, "Cry. Cry it out, and everything will be fine." Only when one was heartbroken to the extreme could they cry like this. At this time, any consolation was pale and powerless. It was much shorter than Qin Yu imagined. Little Hai emerged from his chest. She wiped her eyes a bit restless. The two of them from the past had already changed. She had fallen into the mud, and he had soared into the highest heavens. Qin Yu looked down at his clothes that were wet with tears. He smiled and said, "You are responsible for helping me wash it out." Little Hai revealed a smile, but she still found it hard to conceal her bitterness. Suddenly, there was the sound of a little girl crying. "Mommy, Mommy!" Where Little Hai hurriedly flew back. She hugged the little girl that ran out from below the deck. She was around 7 or 8 years old, and her appearance was similar to her mother's. It was just that her pale skin made her seem even more delicate. "Hiya, why aren't you listening? I told you not to casually walk out of the room." The little girl hugged her mother's neck, her pitch-black eyes filled with fear. "Mommy, there's blood, there's so much blood. I'm scared." Only then did Little Hai notice that the deck was soaked in blood. Her face stiffened and she hugged her daughter even tighter. "It's fine, don't be afraid. It's just some blood. Our Haya, is the strongest child. Chinyu stepped through the void. With a flick of his sleeves, the corpses and bloodstains on the deck were instantly swept away, falling into the sea. He glanced at the pale little girl. Little Hai, is she your daughter? Little Hai wiped her eyes and turned around. That's right, Haya. Hurry and call me. She didn't know how to continue. Chinyu smiled. Call me Uncle Chinyu. He turned his hand, and a light flashed in his palm. A 7-colored jade butterfly appeared, sparkling beneath the sunlight. This is the first time we've met. This is a gift from Uncle to you. Little Hai hurriedly shook her head. It's too precious. We cannot accept it. Chinyu shook his head. It has nothing to do with you. I like this child. Don't you want her to recognize me as her uncle? Faintly sensing the meaning behind Chinyu's words, Little Hai's eyes brightened. She hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Haya, hurry and thank Uncle Chinyu. Haya, or receive the jade butterfly with both hands and bowed. Yueya, thanks Uncle Chinyu. She blinked and turned her head, a confused look on her face. Mommy, is he really Uncle Chinyu? Why does he look so different from the portrait you showed me? Little Hai revealed a flustered look. Haya, don't be rude to Uncle. The portrait, because it was too long ago, Mommy doesn't remember it clearly. Chinyu sighed inwardly. He smiled and said, Haya, the reason your uncle became so handsome is because of my cultivation. You must remember that if you want to become more beautiful in the future, you must earnestly and diligently cultivate. Haya, who didn't seem to understand, but she nodded. Thank you, Uncle, for your teachings. Her eyes dimmed, but Mommy said that I don't need to cultivate. It's fine to just be an ordinary person. Chinyu glanced at little C, who had an awkward expression on her face. He thought for a moment and said, Mommy's words are reasonable. Haya didn't hear anything wrong. He reached out and rubbed her cute little head. What an obedient child. Two maids crawled out from beneath the deck, shivering as they prostrated themselves on the ground. Little C coldly said, I gave the mist to you so that you could take good care of her. Don't let today's events happen a second time. Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. One could see that the two maids were extremely excited. Chinyu glanced at them. His expression didn't change at all. Little Hai whispered a few words to Haya. The little girl politely bid farewell to Chinyu and then followed the maids back below the deck. Turning around, Little Hai pretended to be relaxed. When a person drifts on the sea, if they don't have some methods, they would have already been eaten clean by others. Chinyu didn't comment. He swept his eyes over the ship. It wasn't easy for you to return to land, so why did you come back to the ship to make a living? Little Hai was silent for a moment. She let out a deep breath and said, How can everything in this world go according to one's will? I was wrong in my early years. To live on the sea and die on the sea, perhaps this is my true destiny. She lifted a hand to brush aside her long hair. Her eyes fell on the sea, and she suddenly smiled. To be able to see you again, I am really happy. You must stay and let me entertain you for 2 days. Chinyu shook his head. I can't stay for too long. Without waiting for Little Hai's expression to dim, he continued to say, But I have enough time to eat a meal. It's been many years, and I miss the fish soup you made. Little Hai's face lit up. Of course. My cooking skills were passed down from my mother. The ship has the best fish. You will definitely like it. Those who made a living at sea were used to seeing life and death. Although nearly half of the sailors were injured or killed, those that survived were able to quickly recover. After weighing the anchor, the ship continued to move forward. Occasionally, their eyes would fall on the highest floor of the ship, their eyes filled with awe. Those that were close to death were more likely to worship powerhouses. In the eyes of these cultivators on the ship, Chinyu was undoubtedly a character from the highest heavens. And what surprised them even more was that Madame Hai seemed to have an unusual relationship with this powerful cultivator. Although their imaginations were wild, they didn't dare to reveal any of it on their faces. Instead, awe and reverence rose up in their hearts. If these people were only respectful on the surface before, then after today, none of them dared to have thoughts of betrayal. What nonsense! with a powerhouse of this level as a backer, who would dare to make things difficult for Madam High? The fish soup is here. Little High smiled and carried a stone basin up. Chinyu turned his eyes away from the sea. He could sense that the cultivators on the ship were looking at him, but he didn't care at all. He arranged the bowls and chopsticks and placed a spoon over. Have a taste. How does it taste? The milky white fish soup was boiled down his throat and into his stomach. It was incomparably delicious. Chinyu gave a thumbs up in approval. Little High brightly smiled. A table of dishes and a bowl of fish soup were all made by Little High. In truth, the taste was much better than Chinyu expected. It had been a long time since he had eaten a proper meal. He decided to relax and eat until sweat dripped down his forehead. After burping, Chinyu laid down his bowl and chopsticks. He let out a comfortable breath. I'm full. Little High had already prepared tea. She poured a cup and placed it in front of him. Chinyu took it and drank it in 2 or 3 gulps. He put down the teacup and thought for a moment. I won't ask what happened these past years if you don't want to say it. But what do you plan on doing in the future? His eyes fell on the deck. Life at sea is a bit bitter. Haya, or will gradually grow up. You don't want her to hide in a cabin forever, do you? Little High bit her lips. I've always kept Haya in a cabin. Besides considering her safety, I also didn't want her to be contaminated by the customs of drifting at sea. Originally, I had already made arrangements. When Haya grew a bit older, I would send her ashore. She looked over and respectfully bowed. Today, it is all thanks to you that we mother and daughter were saved. I shouldn't have asked for anything more, but for Haya I can only thicken my skin and say this. Chinyu, I hope that you can leave with Haya You don't need to take care of her too much. I only hope that she can live a peaceful life. Chinyu let out a breath. Stand up and talk. You're making me uncomfortable. Seeing that Little High had no intention of standing up, Chinyu frowned. Little High, what are you doing? Since I agreed, as Haya-er's uncle, I will definitely take care of her. As for you, why do you want to separate from your daughter? I can't bear to see her living alone in this world. Little High's eyes turned red. She didn't say a single word. Chinyu lightly said, if you want to leave, then stay with Haya. I will make arrangements for you. Otherwise, as your daughter, I will have her suffer with you. Little High looked up, tears falling down her cheeks like rain. I am not worthy to be Haya-er's mother. With me by her side, she will never be able to raise her head. Chinyu coldly sneered. Just because you cultivate the art of charm and walk the path of plucking. Little High's crying stopped, and her face paled. She originally wanted to hide it, but she never imagined that Chinyu would already see through it. Shame swelled up in her. Her body swayed, and she forced herself not to fall down. So you already knew. Then why did you still eat, Humph? Why did I still eat the food you cooked? Little High, remember this. In this world, the most sinister thing is the human heart. Some people appear bright on the surface, but are filthy on the inside. Some people, even if they are covered in scars, can still maintain their original intentions. No matter what others do, in my eyes, you are still the Little High of the past. You are my friend, and this will never change. Little High cried out in pain. She wanted to vent all the sorrow and grievances in her heart. Chinyu didn't stop her. He watched as Little High cried herself hoarse and finally fainted. He picked her up, feeling as light as a feather, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. Looking at her pale face and her red and swollen eyes, Chinyu suddenly overturned his previous decision. He wanted to investigate just what Little High had experienced and whether or not there were man-made reasons behind it. Chapter 590. Although Little C was cautious enough, with so many people around her, they would inevitably know some things about her past. Chinyu didn't need to spend too much effort to find out what she had experienced these past years. It wasn't too complicated. She had chosen a cruel and heartless husband and lived a difficult life. Finally, she couldn't bear it any longer and fled back to the sea with her daughter. As for the family that mistreated them, they had already died before Little C left. She was born at the sea. No matter what she looked like on the surface, there was an unerasable viciousness in her bones. Chinyu let out a long breath. and set this matter aside. He only wanted to make sure that there weren't any plots or plots. He had no intention of digging into Little C's sad past. Although Little C's method of ending this matter was a bit ruthless, if she didn't hate them to the extreme, why would she do such a thing? Chinyu wasn't a saint, so he naturally considered things from Little C's perspective. He could understand this. Since their grudges were settled, all that was left was to find a place for this mother and daughter pair. Little C originally didn't want to stay too long, but after 2 days of delay, she changed her mind and left with Chinyu with her daughter. She didn't choose to return to the mainland. Thinking about it, that place had become a sad place for Little C. Chinyu was currently bringing them to the sea race capital city. It turned out that when Little C told the Acacia sect and the others, there were some things that she had concealed. Not only did she see the divine stone that fell from the heavens, but she also found where it fell into the sea. Chinyu summoned the sea map and compared it to the position Little C gave him. He couldn't help but frown. After determining that Little C didn't want to return to the mainland, he immediately set out. Although his experiences in the sea race's capital city hadn't been very pleasant, there were still some people who held some weight in his heart. For instance, Sang Yaya. She was a little girl from the past, but now she should be an adult. For instance, Leon. Up until now, he had only one disciple who had a life full of misfortunes and misfortunes. And there was also the Wolf Rider commander, Shui Zheng, who he owed a favor to. The direction where the divine stone fell was where the capital city was. Now that the various forces of the land of divinity and demons had taken action, it was unknown what methods they would use to obtain the divine stone. The sea races were indeed strong, but that was only relatively speaking. Facing those from the land of divinity and demons, a single mistake would cause a great calamity to befall them. Chinyu wasn't in the mood to be the savior of the world, but he didn't have the heart to see these people suffer the same fate. Little C looked up at the man in front of her, at his broad, straight back. Her heart was at peace. That familiar sense of security that she had never felt from anyone else enveloped her once again. Back then, if she had less scruples and unbridledly pursued him, would she have had to endure all these years of suffering? Hyder seemed to sense something. She gently shook her mother's hand and said in a small voice, "Mom, what's wrong?" Little C regained his composure. Looking at the obedient Haya, he quickly suppressed the tumbling thoughts in his heart. What was the point of thinking about this now? If Chinyu discovered this, it would only make things awkward for both sides. If Haya-er's future was affected because of this, even if she died, she would feel extremely guilty. Little C hugged Haya-er tightly in her arms. She smiled and said, "It's nothing. Mommy is just curious about what the sea race kings are like." Chinyu stepped forwards. The seawater on both sides automatically parted, forming a road that led straight into the deep sea. His eyes flashed, and he let out a light breath. When one's cultivation reached his boundary, their senses were far sharper than the average person could imagine. Chinyu had already sensed some of Little C's feelings, but he pretended not to know. In his heart, he was a bit worried. If Little C revealed her feelings, how could he not make her sad? Now Little C seemed to have figured it out. Without a doubt, this was the best result. Even though they slowed down to take care of Little C and her mother, the three of them still arrived outside the sea race capital city a day later. Even after dozens of years, it didn't seem any different from before. Chinyu sensed the surroundings and relaxed. The situation was better than he had imagined. Although there were several tyrannical auras in the capital city, the order wasn't in chaos. His eyes fell on the giant ships docked outside the capital city. Chinyu's eyes flashed. "Come, let's go in." The strength of the Tao of water spread out, covering the three of them. Even as they entered the capital city, no one noticed their arrival. Faint ripples of water vapor covered their figures. With Chinyu's current cultivation, if he deliberately hid himself, there was no flaw at all. Although the divine stone was good, he had no intention of fighting for it. The reason he came to the sea race capital city was to ensure their safety and also to find a place for Little C and her mother. If so, then it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. He didn't want to alarm too many people. Otherwise, if he were to be drawn into trouble, it would be difficult for him to escape. As they walked down the street, any sea folk that approached the three of them would be moved away by an invisible strength. Chinyu suddenly stopped. He looked up at the 9-story building with the words Sea Spirit Pavilion hanging on the signboard, shining with a brilliant light. At the main entrance, many sea folk were entering and exiting. It was clear business was good. "Guests, please take care." A light voice spread into his ears. A cold and aloof female cultivator escorted several women out. Looking at her clothes, she seemed to be a high-level figure of Sea Spirit Pavilion. It seemed that these women had some background. Yu's eyes flashed. He didn't think that the first person he would see would be her, Clearwood. She was as beautiful as she was in the past, but for some unknown reason, there was a bit of worry in her eyes. Little C glanced at the beautiful woman outside Sea Spirit Pavilion. She smiled and said, "Since we know each other, why don't we meet?" Yu shook his head. "There's no need." In the past, although he had benefited greatly from Sea Spirit Pavilion, he had already repaid them. Moreover, the difference in status between them was far too great. Even if they met, besides making Clearwood feel uncomfortable, what else could he do? If they wanted to reminisce about the past, their relationship clearly hadn't reached that point. It would be better to let this beautiful woman maintain her cold and arrogant demeanor and not destroy her image in his memories. Little C didn't understand, but she didn't say anything. She smiled and left. After sending off the several female guests, Clearwood suddenly frowned. She looked towards the bustling street, but wherever her eyes fell, there was nothing but emptiness. The slight fluctuation that had appeared in her heart just now had already vanished. Perhaps it was because she had been thinking too much, causing her mind to fall into a trance. She took a deep breath and suppressed her thoughts. Then, she turned and hurried into Sea Spirit Pavilion. Perhaps in her entire life, she would never know that an old friend of hers was standing not too far away, looking at her from afar. An hour later, Yu stopped in front of a massive courtyard. The construction was exquisite and luxurious, but it also gave off a majestic aura. But now, in Yu's eyes, this courtyard was a bit dilapidated, as if it lacked vitality. This courtyard was a gift he had given out in the past. As he thought of Ching who had died, Yu gently sighed. With a flick of his sleeves, the figures of 3 people appeared. The 2 sea folk standing outside were experienced and knowledgeable. They didn't make a fuss about this, but their attitudes were especially respectful. "May I ask who you are? What business do you have at our residence?" The 3 people in front of him seemed to be humans. But in these past years, because of certain reasons, the status of humans in the sea race capital city had risen by a great deal. Moreover, their master had always been close to humans. The 2 sea folk didn't dare to look down on him in the slightest. Yu lightly said, "I'll have to trouble you to inform your master that an old friend of the human race has come to visit. Please wait here." One of the sea folk stayed behind. The other turned and entered the side door, hurrying to report. A moment later, the front door was opened. A group of black-armored riders with a cold and dignified aura walked out. Leon was surrounded by them. Dozens of years had passed. That cowardly and lowly nobody from the past had grown up. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and he actually had a dignified air about him. His eyes were vigilant. He said in a low voice, "May I ask who fellow Taoist is and why you are pretending to be an old friend of mine?" The 2 sea folk guarding the door nearly fainted upon hearing this. This person looked dignified, but he was actually a swindler who had come to visit. Recently, the limelight in the capital city hadn't been too good. Their master hadn't shown himself for a long time. Now that something like this had happened, how could they have any good ending? As they looked at Yu, their eyes were filled with gnashing teeth. To be questioned and suspected by his only disciple, although the reason was because of him, Yu still felt a bit uncomfortable. But as he looked at the boy from the past and how outstanding he had become, he felt even more gratified. Yu smiled and said, "Leon, it's been so many years since we last met. Do you not recognize an old friend?" This voice, Leon's complexion changed. He stubbornly stared at Chinyu, his eyes filled with surprise and shock. You just who are you? Chinyu smiled. Many years ago, you lived on the edge of the capital city with your mother and little brother. In a small alley, a human guest came to live next door. This was already enough. Leon's eyes widened, and his face flushed red with excitement. But before he could do anything, Chinyu's gaze stopped him. Leon took a deep breath and respectfully said, So it was you. Forgive me for my poor eyesight, but I have truly offended you. Please, honored guest, come in and have some tea. Several black knights were puzzled. Just as they were about to say something, Leon said in a low voice, He is indeed an old friend of mine. If there is a problem, I will bear all the consequences. Only then did the black knights draw back. After everyone left, only Chinyu, Leon, and Chinyu remained in the hall. Leon fell to his knees, tears flowing down his cheeks. Teacher, the matter of him meeting his teacher for the first time was a secret. In order to avoid trouble, he had never spoken of it to anyone. Seeing Leon reveal his true feelings, Chinyu was moved. He gently said, Quickly rise. Leon shook his head. This disciple has received great graciousness from teacher, but I have never served him for all these years. I am not worthy to be teacher's disciple. Chinyu was silent for a moment. He sighed and said, What happened in the past? It was teacher who implicated you. Although he didn't say it clearly, both sides knew what he was referring to. Leon hurriedly shook his head. Teacher, please don't say that. If it weren't for you, Ching and I would never have been able to walk together. In the end, it was this disciple who didn't have the luck to protect her for the rest of her life. Chinyu glanced at the few strands of white hair sticking out from his temples. He couldn't bear it any longer. Ching has been gone for all these years. Have you not found another person? Leon said, In my life, I will only love Ching alone. I will not allow another woman to live in this courtyard. As he spoke here, he bitterly smiled. In the past, although Ching didn't thank teacher, she truly liked this courtyard you gave us. You said that there were many places she planned to decorate it. Chinyu sighed. He stood up and pulled Leon up. That's enough. Let's not talk about these sad matters. How have you been these past years? Leon respectfully said, Because of teacher, Monsieur holds me in high regard. Now that I am in charge of the Wolf Riders, no one dares to slight me in the least. Wolf Riders? Chinyu frowned. Shuezheng is no longer the commander of the Wolf Riders? Leon nodded. Around 20 years ago, Commander Shuezheng received orders to leave the capital city to patrol. During this time, an accident occurred, and his whereabouts have been unknown ever since. He knew that his teacher had some friendship with Shuezheng. He thought for a moment and said, Afterwards, His Majesty sent out many people to search for him, but they didn't find anything. For 20 years without a trace, it wasn't likely that he was still alive. Chinyu was silent for several breaths of time. He sighed inwardly. This was life. No one knew what the future would be like. Thinking of the favor he owed Shuezheng in the past, Chinyu asked, Does Shuezheng have any descendants or relatives? Leon guessed his teacher's meaning. His eyes became even more respectful, but there was a hint of regret in his voice. No one knows where Commander Shuezheng came from. In these years, he has been in charge of the Wolf Riders, but he hasn't cared about personal matters. Thus, he doesn't have any relatives or descendants. Chinyu bitterly smiled. This Shuezheng, did he want him to owe him a favor from the past for the rest of his life? Leon saw him remain silent. His eyes fell on little C and Haya. He hesitantly asked, Teacher, these two are? He didn't sense too much intimacy from the three of them, so he didn't think too much about it. But he knew that his teacher didn't like to meddle in other people's business, so he was a bit surprised that Chinyu had brought a mother and daughter with him. Chinyu put down his thoughts. Little C is a friend of mine for many years. This is her daughter, Haya. He paused for a moment and continued to say, Little C and her daughter will be residing in the capital city from today onwards. I cannot stay here for long, so I will have to ask you to look after them in the future. Leon said, Teacher, rest assured that this disciple will take care of everything. Seeing his lack of manners, Chinyu frowned. Little C once saved my life. Hiya, is my recognized niece. Leon's expression turned solemn. He bowed. Leon thanks Little C for saving my life on behalf of teacher. In the future, no matter what happens in the capital city, you can come find me. Leon will not refuse. Little C quickly moved aside and bowed back. Qin Yu's expression relaxed. He looked at the restless Leon. You seem to have something on your mind? Leon's face was full of hesitation. Qin Yu lightly said, What? You can't even tell me, your teacher? Leon fell to his knees. Teacher, please calm your anger. This disciple absolutely wouldn't dare to disrespect you in the slightest. It's just that this disciple doesn't know whether or not he should tell you. Carefully looking at Leon's expression, Qin Yu saw that there was only fear and apprehension in his eyes. He calmed down a little. It wasn't that Leon's thoughts were too dark, but that the hearts and minds of this world were constantly changing. Speak. If teacher can help you, I won't stand idly by. Leon clenched his teeth. This matter isn't because of this disciple. He cowed out. This disciple has been unfilial. I have received much care from Miss Yaya these past years, and I cannot bear to see anything happen to her. I can only trouble teacher. Then, he spoke of the current situation in the sea race capital city. As he thought, it was related to the divine stone that fell from the heavens. Several days ago, a meteor had fallen from the heavens, crashing into the sea region. This sort of matter was common and occurred many times a year. But this meteor was clearly different. It shined like a sun at the bottom of the sea, and the aura it emitted was inconceivably strong. The royal palace had tried to investigate this meteor, but they couldn't approach it at all. And at this time, other sea folk arrived to demand the meteor. That meteor fell in the deepest depths of the sea mausoleum. Buried within are extremely high-ranking ancestors of the sea folk. Only those with direct bloodlines can enter, so they have no choice but to pressure us in a disguised form. Of the current royal family, only His Majesty and Miss Yaya have a bloodline that satisfies the conditions to enter the sea mausoleum. His Majesty's life is related to the stability of the sea races, so those people don't dare to act recklessly. Instead, they set their sights on Miss Yaya. Before Qin Yu entered the capital city, he had seen several large ships. These were the warships of the foreign sea folk. As he thought of the several tyrannical auras he sensed, Qin Yu was left speechless. According to Leon, the royal family was the true direct bloodline of the sea folk. Yet they were in such a miserable state, far worse than the branch bloodline. But now wasn't the time to worry about these things. Since this matter involved Sang Yaya, he couldn't stand idly by. In the past, that little girl had helped him a great deal, and in these past years she had been taking care of Leon. Qin Yu sighed inwardly, a bit helpless. His previous thoughts of staying out of this matter had clearly failed. He stood up and said, Let's go and see Sang Yaya. Leon hesitated. Teacher, although those people are only from a branch bloodline of the royal family, their ancestors obtained a great stroke of good fortune. On the warships that came to the capital city, there's several people with incomparably terrifying strength. As if thinking of something, his face paled. Qin Yu lightly said, Don't worry, nothing will happen. Those people were indeed strong, and one of them had even touched upon the calamity immortal realm. But in front of him, they weren't anything at all. Leon was overjoyed. He knew that his teacher always had his own way of doing things. Since he said this, all of his worries were gone. Miss Yaya is currently in the royal palace. Teacher, follow me. Leon strode out of the living room and ordered for a carriage to be prepared. By the time Qin Yu arranged for little C and her daughter to arrive at the main entrance, the carriage was already parked. Leon glanced at Qin Yu and saw that he didn't stop them. He respectfully said, Teacher, please enter the carriage. Since he wanted to help Sang Yaya, there was no way he could hide it any longer. Qin Yu boarded the carriage and Leon personally drove it away. The several sea folk at the entrance couldn't help but drop their jaws, their faces filled with shock. Their master's teacher wasn't that. Everyone regained their composure, and their faces flushed red. Their hearts were filled with the excitement of facing a legend, A squad of black riders galloped to either side of the carriage. Even though they were usually calm, their eyes couldn't help but drift towards the carriage. In truth, this person's name was far too resounding amongst the sea races. A short few dozen years wasn't enough to erase the traces left behind in the past. But in the end, they weren't ordinary people. They knew more and soon calmed down. This person was indeed incomparably powerful. In the past, the whale's sovereign had died beneath his hands. But today, the malicious guest in the royal palace had strength that the whale's sovereign couldn't compare with. Did he really think he could interfere? The current sea race capital city was no longer the same as it was in the past. Soon, the royal palace appeared in sight. The ones guarding the gates of the royal palace were the neatly equipped and dignified wolf riders. As they saw their commander personally drive over, they all fell to their knees. Leon leapt off the carriage. He asked, "How is the palace?" A wolf rider bowed. Reporting to commander, "There is a banquet being held in the palace. The branch royal descendants are being entertained." Leon's complexion changed. Open the palace gates. He leapt onto the carriage and forcefully lashed out with his whip. The carriage was like an arrow released from a bow as it shot into the palace. Those bastards, they really couldn't wait any longer. He didn't dare to delay at all. For a carriage to wildly rush through the royal palace was already a great crime of disrespect. If this were a normal time, that old bastard soup man would have already rushed over and dragged down the insolent person to punish him. But now, although the palace servants looked over with fear in their eyes, they were at a loss and didn't know what to do. Hiya! Hiya! Leon cracked his whip with all his might. The carriage soon arrived outside the banquet hall. A large number of black riders stood guard outside the hall. They were a vast expanse of black, like a silent black cloud. As they sensed the carriage madly rushing towards them, they shouted out loud. The black riders raised their spears, their slaughter intent soaring into the heavens. In the grand hall, the sea sovereign sat high on his throne. To his left, several sea folk had cold and arrogant expressions. Across from him were great figures of the capital city. They came from Noble Court Avenue and were originally peak nobles. But now they could only stiffly smile. There was movement outside the hall. A sea folk on the left put down his wine cup and said, "What is it? Does His Majesty plan on attacking us?" With a sneer, powerful fluctuations of cultivation erupted, instantly sweeping through the hall and covering everyone within. The sea sovereign's fingertips turned white and the wine cup in his hand deformed. He coldly said, "What is going on?" Soon, a palace servant reported, "Your Majesty, the leader of the wolf riders, Leon, requests an audience." The sea sovereign frowned. "Tell him that there is a banquet in the palace. He can come another day to request an audience." "Hold on." The first person on the left slowly said, "I heard that this Commander Leon only has his current status because of Miss Sangyi's care. It seems that their relationship is quite close. Since His Majesty isn't willing to send a message, then let Commander Leon help us invite someone." His eyes were deep. "Your Majesty, we have already been here for a long time. I believe that you won't refuse my proposal, right? Direct bloodline? Humph. If it weren't for the fact that they feared a backlash and that they weren't the only powerful sea race branch families here, they would have already seized the capital city. What qualifications did a bunch of trash have to inherit the capital city left behind by their ancestors? All they did was take over a natural bloodline. There was no respect in his heart, and his words were filled with threats. Ha! The wine cup in the sea sovereign's hand shattered. To the right, Mr. Turtle's complexion changed. He hurriedly said, "What Duke Immortal Jade says is correct. Since Leon has come, then let him invite Miss You." He looked at the sea sovereign, his eyes full of pleading. Although these sea race branch families had some fear in their hearts, if this matter were to be blown up, it would be irreversible. The sea sovereign was silent for several breaths of time. Then he slowly closed his eyes. Although his back was still straight, he revealed a dejected aura. Mr. Turtle's eyes turned sour. He naturally knew just what sort of proud person His Majesty was. To compromise today would be worse than killing him. But in order to avoid a catastrophe and maintain the inheritance of the sea race's direct bloodline, His Majesty could only lower his noble head. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Turtle loudly said, "Summon Leon into the hall." Duke Immortal Jade and the other sea race branch families had relaxed expressions. Deep in their eyes, a bit of satisfaction flashed. So what if they were direct bloodline descendants? Now, they could only do things according to their wishes. With the sound of footsteps, two figures entered the hall one after the other. Leon bowed. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Sea Sovereign closed his eyes, not speaking. Mr. Turtle squeezed out a smile. "Leon, the royal descendants wish to see Miss you. Go and invite her." Chapter 591. Qin Yu's eyes fell on the girl who had just entered the hall. Even with his firm will, he couldn't help but tremble. In the past, Sang Ye was a beauty that could topple nations. Now that she had grown up, she was even more beautiful than he had imagined. The well-tailored long dress clung to her delicate and graceful figure. The faint, clear yellow color was like the pistils of a blooming flower. One glance was enough to move one's soul and make one want to protect her. Between her delicate features, one could still see how she looked when she was a child. The only difference was that there was a bit more of a distant indifference. Compared to the Sang Ye that he had seen grow up, she seemed a bit different. Qin Yu quickly restrained his thoughts. If he continued to think about this, then he would go too far. He couldn't be a strange uncle. Slowly walking into the hall, Sang Ye bowed. She lowered her head, revealing her snow-white neck. "Sang Ye greets Your Majesty." The Sea Sovereign opened his eyes. As he looked at her calm face and the decisiveness deep in her eyes, his heart trembled and a bit of sourness gushed out. "Ye, do you know why Uncle has summoned you here?" Sang Ye nodded. "Ye knows. Then your mother told me that as a direct descendant of the royal family, I have an unshirkable responsibility on my back. Ye was born rich and noble, enjoying unsurpassed glory and honor. This is all because of my birth. Now, Ye has grown up and is willing to share Your Majesty's worries and serve the royal family." The Sea Sovereign sucked in a deep breath. Good. You are truly worthy of being my niece. Big Sister has taught you well." As he thought of his good-for-nothing children and then looked at Sang Ye, who was now calm and composed, the Sea Sovereign made a decision. "Mr. Turtle, I ask you to draft an imperial edict. The eldest princess daughter Sang Ye is intelligent and worthy of praise. She has a sacred heart, and from this day forward, she will be conferred the title of Crown Princess. 100 years from now, she will succeed the throne of the sea races. If Sang Ye didn't die after entering the sea mausoleum, this imperial edict was the only compensation he could give her." Mr. Turtle respectfully bowed. He cupped his hands together and said, "Greetings, Your Highness Crown Princess." Across from him, the Duke of Immortal Jade and the other branches of the royal family all had gloomy expressions. But the sea races placed great importance on respect. Even if they had powerful cultivations, they still couldn't ignore etiquette. "This Duke greets the Crown Princess." Sang Ye kowtowed in thanks. Then, she stood up and looked at them. "I can agree to help you enter the sea mausoleum to obtain the spirit stones. But you must all agree to 2 conditions." Duke Xian Yu's expression softened a little. "Please speak, Crown Princess." "First, I will need some time to prepare. The time to enter the sea mausoleum will be 5 days from now. Second, I will do everything in my power to extract the divine stone. But if anything goes wrong and I am buried in the sea mausoleum, you're not allowed to mention this matter for any reason." Duke Xinyu frowned. "We are pressed for time and can only give Your Highness 3 days to prepare." As for the second matter, a faint coldness surfaced in the depths of his eyes. "The divine stone is extremely important to our sea clan and concerns the future of the royal family. We must obtain it. I believe Your Highness can understand this." Although they had their reservations, for the sake of the god stone, they were willing to give it up. If Sang Ye died, then even if the next one wasn't the sea sovereign, it would be another direct branch royal family. This would continue until the godstone was sent out of the sea mausoleum. Even if it meant that countless members of the direct bloodline would die, it was still worth it. Sang Yiye was enraged. You. Just as she was about to speak, she was interrupted. Duke Xinyu's voice was ice cold. Your Highness Crown Princess, we have already made sufficient compromises. Don't push your luck. Below, several royal branch sea folk sneered and released their auras. Their powerful cultivations fell on everyone's chests, making it incomparably difficult to breathe. Sang Yiye paled. She sucked in a deep breath. I will definitely take out the divine stone. Her voice was firm. In her heart, she was already prepared to die. Fool! A loud shout echoed out, each word filled with a lecture. Even the sea sovereign doesn't have full confidence he can escape from the sea mausoleum. If you go in, isn't that the same as sending yourself to your death? The hall fell silent. Everyone's eyes fell onto a figure in the corner of the hall. This person had entered the hall with Leon. Because of the tense situation, no one had bothered with him, but now he actually dared to say such words? Duke Xinyu sneered. Who do you think you are that you dare to speak in the hall? You are courting death. At this time, the direct branch had already bowed their heads. He would not allow any more twists and turns to occur. A royal branch sea folk fiendishly grinned. He lifted a hand and pressed down. Go to hell. It was he who had killed someone in the great court hall and shocked the capital city's sea folk in a single move. He couldn't wait to see these weak fellows pale and panic-stricken once more. Bang! With a loud explosion, a terrifying shockwave erupted outwards. The sea folks' eyes widened and faint traces of blood climbed up their cheeks. Bang! Bang! Dense rumbling sounds emitted from his chest. Like a fruit that had fallen to the ground, thick blood gushed out from his head. This blood was mixed with pieces of his organs. His body slumped to the ground, all signs of life extinguished. The hall was deathly silent. Everyone subconsciously widened their eyes, their faces filled with astonishment. No one imagined that this would be the result. The one who had tried to kill someone had died instead. Although Xinyu hadn't done anything from start to finish, the shockwaves were still visible in their eyes. Had he been forcefully shaken to death? Everyone's eyes fell onto the calm figure in the corner of the hall. From the depths of their souls, they instinctively felt a deep awe. Leon was so excited that he nearly shouted out loud. In the great court hall, the one that had been killed by this sea folk branch was a friend he had made over the years. Although their relationship was ordinary, he had been standing beside Leon when he was killed, and bits and pieces of flesh and blood had splashed all over him. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't have lost his composure and fear when he mentioned this royal branch master to Xinyu. It was truly a shadow in his heart. But now, this terrifying royal branch master had actually been shaken to death by his teacher's strength. This was far too satisfying. Indeed, his teacher was indeed his teacher. He was far more tyrannical than he had imagined. Sang Yiye's mouth fell open, her face filled with shock. Her mind went blank for a long time before she barely managed to recover her ability to think. Her eyes fell onto the figure in the corner. After looking at it several times, she discovered that this was an extremely handsome man. No, if she were to only describe him as handsome, then that was simply having eyes but failing to see. His tall and straight back, his calm eyes, his calm demeanor, all of this exuded a sense of self-confidence and nobility. This wasn't an ordinary person, but in Sang Yiye's memories, there wasn't a single trace of this person. No matter who it was, as long as they saw such an outstanding man, it was impossible for them to not have any impression of him. Although this person had a reprimanding tone just now, it was clear that he was protective and concerned about her. If it were anyone else, Sang Yiye might have thought that they had taken a fancy to her beauty. But this man in front of her was absolutely not. His eyebrows and eyes, looking carefully, they did seem a bit familiar. Had she seen him before when he was a child? Duke Immortal Jade was enraged. An early Blue Sea Junior couldn't be considered an important character, but for him to be killed in front of him was the greatest provocation to the Bullet Sea race. But as he thought about how Qin Yu hadn't moved at all and had used the strength of the shaking to kill the sea race, he swallowed back the curses he was about to say. "Who are you? You dare to kill a royal descendant of my Bullet Sea race? Do you want to become enemies with my entire race?" Unexpectedly, Qin Yu didn't even glance at him. He said to Sang Yi, "Forget about this matter. You cannot enter the sea mausoleum." Duke Immortal Jade was truly enraged. He slammed his palm down on the table in front of him, shattering the plates and plates. He roared, "Human cultivator, no matter who you are, you do not have the qualifications to meddle in the matters of the sea race's royal family." Qin Yu had no expression. "I have already interfered. What do you want? You are courting death." Duke Immortal Jade shouted out loud. His powerful cultivation erupted, and the ground beneath him instantly shattered. Cracks rapidly spread out like a spider web towards Qin Yu. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, "Stop!" Dong! The ground shook and the entire hall trembled. The rapidly spreading cracks were forcefully broken apart. Duke Immortal Jade's complexion paled. He coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. But he didn't dare to reveal any anger on his face. Instead, there was panic. "Royal brother, why did you stop me?" A white-robed sea folk appeared in the hall. Between his eyebrows were speckled with scales that rippled with a brilliant halo of light. His eyes widened as he heard Qin Yu's words. He cupped his hands together and said, "Fellow Taoist, my young clan brother has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. If he has offended you, I ask that you forgive him. I apologize on his behalf." Qin Yu looked at him, remaining silent. The white-robed sea folk's pupils shrank. He turned and thrust out his palm. Duke Immortal Jade cried out pitifully as he was sent flying backwards, blood spraying from his nose and mouth. He turned and bowed. "Fellow Taoist, is this punishment enough?" It seemed that if Qin Yu didn't respond, he could continue attacking. This time, everyone was truly frightened. The white-robed sea folk had been given the title of King of the Nanyuan. Although this was a title given to him by the Bull Branch, one could still see that he had an exalted status and was the strongest person in his group. Now, was he apologizing to this stranger? Even Leon felt as if his brain was lacking oxygen, and he felt dizzy. He knew that his teacher was strong, but he never imagined that his teacher would be strong to the point where he could subdue an enemy without even fighting. From the very start, his teacher hadn't done anything. He had only stood there, and yet the king-level powerhouse of the Bull Branch had lowered his head and apologized. What sort of might was this? Leon suddenly thought back to the words that the Mist had said in the past. Death is not the end. In these past years, he had thought about this countless times. Finally, he had arrived at a possibility that even he found hard to believe. But even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, Leon wouldn't give up. He would do everything in his power to grasp it. A throbbing feeling rose from the depths of his heart. Leon couldn't help but shiver. Qin Yu lightly said, "Take your people and leave the capital city. I won't pursue this any further." The Nanyuan king decisively said, "All right." He turned and left. Several Bull Branch clansmen helped up the fainted Duke Immortal Jade and hurriedly followed behind. No one here was a fool. How could they not see that this person in front of them was absolutely terrifying to the extreme? Not even the Nanyuan king could afford to provoke him. The sea sovereign stood up. He quickly stepped down from his throne and bowed. "Thank you, senior, for helping me. This solitude is deeply grateful." Qin Yu had a faint expression. "I didn't help because of his majesty." These words didn't leave any face behind. The sea sovereign's face stiffened. Luckily, the awkward atmosphere in the hall didn't last for too long. Qin Yu looked at Sang Yi and furrowed his eyebrows. "I've already said many things, and you've also looked at me for a long time. Do you still not recognize who I am?" Leon knew his teacher's temperament and how highly he regarded Sang Yi. Otherwise, he wouldn't have changed his original intentions and interfered in this matter. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Your Highness, look carefully. The one standing in front of you is my teacher." "Ah!" Sang Yi cried out in alarm. She stared at Qin Yu. "You You are Big Brother Chinyu. She hesitated. This was because the Chinyu in her memories wasn't like the one in front of her right now, the one who was so handsome that it angered even the heavens. Chinyu rubbed his face. He helplessly said, "When I discovered that I had become more handsome, I was smug with myself for a long time. But now I think it's troublesome. Including you, little girl, none of you can recognize me. Can't I change a little?" This joking tone, there was no mistake. It really was him. Big Brother Chinyu. Sang Yiya threw herself at him. Her warm body immediately filled his nose and mouth with the fragrance of a young woman. Soft, the sensation of touching his chest was amazing. Chinyu revealed an awkward expression and didn't know where to put his hands. He coughed and said, "Yiya, you are already a young lady, so why aren't you a bit more reserved? Hurry up and come out. You're the crown princess now, so don't let others laugh at you." Unfortunately, Sang Yiya had just experienced great emotional ups and downs. She had just escaped from death, and her heart was surging with emotions. How could she possibly listen to him? Not only did she not let go of him, but she instead hugged him even tighter. Seeing the helplessness and stiffness on Chinyu's face, the sea race monarchs and ministers, who had been shaken to the point of dizziness, slowly regained their composure. Leon's teacher, human cultivator, it was him. It was actually him in just a few short decades. How could he have become so powerful? But regardless of whether they believed it or not, the truth was right in front of their eyes. In the capital city, the human junior who had been faintly manipulated by them had now soared into the heavens, becoming an existence they could only look up to. In the hall, beside Sang Yiya, the one most surprised was Ching's father. In these past years, because of Leon, he had obtained some compensation and become one of the new nobles of the capital city. Looking at Sang Yiya tightly hugging Leon, he was overjoyed. With such a teacher, Leon's future was limitless. In these past years, even though Ching had died, Leon still treated the couple with great respect, truly treating them as his own family. In the early years, because the Ching family couple had a knot in their hearts, they had treated Leon coldly. But in the end, they were still moved by him, and their relationship became close, almost as if he were their own. There were two people who were the most nervous. One was the old turtle sitting on the right, and the other was Soup Man sitting next to the sea sovereign. These two people had taught Chinyu many lessons in the past. If they were to settle old scores, their fates would likely be miserable. The two old fellows lowered their heads, nearly turning into ostriches for fear that they would attract Chinyu's attention. Chinyu helplessly said, "The clothes I just washed have been ruined by your hands. Let's make a deal. If you want to cry, then cry, but don't wipe your snot." To a young girl, these words were lethal. Sang Yiya coquettishly pouted and punched Chinyu's chest. Finally, she stopped crying. Chinyu quickly changed the topic. "I hurried over to the capital city and didn't even have time to catch my breath before I ran over to support you. I'm so tired that I'm dizzy. Hurry up and let me rest." Sang Yiya revealed a nervous expression. "Big Brother Chinyu, are you injured?" She pulled his hand and looked him over. Chinyu coughed. "No, I'm just tired." Sang Yiya nodded again and again. "I'll bring you to rest." It was only then that she regained her composure. Under the watchful eyes of everyone in the hall, she blushed red and bowed. "Your Majesty, please allow me to bring Big Brother Chinyu to rest first." The sea sovereign naturally agreed. "If Mr. Chin needs anything, please feel free to speak." Looking at Sang Yiya's red eyes and the pitiful look in them, Chinyu didn't give her any more face. He casually nodded in agreement. He looked at the old turtle and Soup Man and paused for a moment. Seeing the two old fellows stiffen, Chinyu nearly laughed out loud. "You two, we can be considered old acquaintances. Since I've returned, I hope we can get closer in the future." The old turtle and Soup Man nearly cried. Chinyu laughed out loud. As Sang Yiya pouted, he was pulled out of the hall. Outside the sea race capital city, several warships started to move. As the lines of the array formation lit up, they released a powerful propelling strength. Bang! Seawater tumbled, and the warships rapidly sailed away. looking at the capital city that gradually became smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared from sight. The Southern Yuan King let out a long breath of relief. He couldn't help but lift his hand and wipe away the beads of sweat on his forehead. It was only then that he discovered that his back was also soaked. The several bold-branched sea folk behind him glanced at each other in dismay. They hadn't entered the royal palace, so they didn't know what had happened. A person cautiously said, "My king, what happened? Why do we have to leave?" The Southern Yuan King clenched his teeth. "If we don't leave, should we stay and wait for death?" His eyes fell on the unconscious Duke Immortal Jade, and he ruthlessly kicked him. "If you continue to play dead, I will tear you apart and feed you to the fish." Duke Immortal Jade's body shook, and he quickly opened his eyes. But his injuries weren't light. His face was deathly pale, and he couldn't stand up. His eyes were filled with grief. The Southern Yuan King was enraged. "You disgraceful thing! Do you still dare to be dissatisfied? If it weren't for me promptly taking action, you would already be dead." Duke Immortal Jade shook his head again and again. "Brother King's punishment is not something I dare to hold a grudge against. But just how terrifying was that person that Brother King would make you run so far away? Avoid my ass." This king was scared away. The Southern Yuan King gulped. "I don't know how strong the human is, but there is one thing I am sure of. If he wanted to kill someone, even I wouldn't be able to stop a single finger of his." The complexions of the sea folk all changed. The Southern Yuan King was known as the #1 person below the Calamity Immortal realm in the Bullet Branch bloodline. He had once fought a Calamity immortal without dying, but even he had to admit that he couldn't block a single finger of that human. Just how strong was that person? The direct bloodline of the royal family had long since declined. In these past years, they hadn't produced a single powerhouse, so how could they know such a terrifying existence? And most importantly, with the protection of this terrifying human, how could they take away the divine stone? Thinking of this, everyone revealed a bitter expression. "King, what do we do next? Do we really have to leave like this?" If they couldn't obtain the divine stone, no matter what the reason was, they were all at fault. This wasn't a small problem. The Southern Yuan King's eyes were cloudy and uncertain. "Let's leave first. Otherwise, we won't know when to retreat. Once this storm calms down a bit, I will make arrangements." Sangya swept away her noble and dignified appearance in front of everyone and turned into a typical chatterbox. She chattered on and on in front of Chinyu. She talked about how hard she had cultivated these past years and how astonishing her progress had been. That was how her father and mother had changed their minds and allowed her to return to the capital city. She talked about how Leon wasn't willing to work hard and how she had persuaded him many times, giving him pressure and motivation, allowing him to have today's achievements. Of course, she couldn't forget. She talked about how she missed her big brother Chinyu, interspersing every word she said. It wasn't annoying at all. Rather, one could truly feel how much she missed him in her heart. Chinyu smiled as he listened, his heart warm. He had unexpectedly returned to this place. But whether it was little C or Leon, when they faced him, there was always a bit more awe and respect that he couldn't see. He couldn't say anything more and could only allow them to do as they pleased. Thus, Sang Yi's true feelings and unwavering heart were especially precious. He liked this sort of feeling where everything was the same as it was in the beginning. It was like he was still the little human cultivator that lived in the sea race capital city, and she was still that innocent and lively noble daughter of the royal family. Sang Yi's mouth went dry, and she drank all the tea in the large shell. Only then did she notice that Chinyu had been looking at her the entire time. She lowered her head, and her cheeks flushed red. Before Chinyu could feel the pride of having a daughter and his family begin to spread, he nearly choked to death on her next words. "Big brother Chinyu, have you changed your mind? I've always liked you. As long as you are willing, we can get married today." After a violent coughing fit, Chinyu's face flushed red. He looked at the sad and innocent Sang Yi and didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. This girl, she really needed to be spanked. Cough, cough. All right, she really couldn't be spanked right now. Sang Yi pouted. She angrily said, Fine, fine. I know that Big Brother Chinyu has someone in his heart, and you don't like me, but you don't need to be so scared. I won't make you take responsibility. Stop, stop. Chinyu waved his hand again and again. There is nothing between us, so why would I take responsibility? Sangyea stuck out her chest and humphed. Do you dare to say that when you hugged me before, you didn't feel anything at all? You were clearly the one who forced your way in, but he didn't have the face to say these words. Chinyu was embarrassed. He could only cough again to cover it up. I won't scare Big Brother Chinyu anymore. After all these years, have you found the person you've always loved? Sangyea asked curiously. Chinyu nodded and then shook his head. Black lines covered Sangyea's face. What do you mean? Chinyu's expression was calm. I found her, but I lost her. But I believe that the day of our reunion isn't too far off. This time, I will not let anyone, no matter what, take her away from my side. His words were calm, but they were heavy. Sangyea nodded. I believe in you. Big Brother Chinyu, you will definitely be able to do it. Chinyu smiled. I'll work hard. He yawned. But I really am tired right now. Senya stood up. Big Brother Chinyu, you should rest. I will help you wash up and change your clothes. When you wake up and take a bath, you'll feel more comfortable. Watching her leave, Chinyu smiled. This girl really was born with a heart made of crystal. Sensing his mood, she obediently left. She was an obedient and sensible girl. He leaned back in his chair. No matter how much he suppressed it, the urgency in his heart became even stronger. He really didn't want to delay any longer. He wished he could immediately return to the land of divinity and demons and inherit the throne of the Holy Monarch, because only by doing so would he be able to control a sufficient amount of power. Very soon. That's right. His plan was that Chinyu had no intention of fighting for the Divine Stone. Although he didn't have direct evidence, when they first crossed swords in the royal palace, if Chinyu really wanted the Divine Stone, he wouldn't have needed to go through so much trouble. He only needed to reveal his cultivation, and that would have been enough to scare away the Bull clan. Of course, things were not absolute, so the Nanyuan king added another sentence to express his respect and humility. Chinyu was expressionless, but he knew that what the old man said wasn't wrong. No matter what great lucky chance was hidden within this divine stone, it wasn't something that the capital city's sea folk had the qualifications to possess. But now that the divine stone had fallen deep into the sea mausoleum, he also knew the inside story. Only direct descendants of the royal family, with a sufficiently powerful bloodline, could enter. Only the sea sovereign and Sangyea fulfilled the conditions. How could they take the divine stone? Undying's voice suddenly sounded out in his mind. Master, why don't you personally take action? Even if the sea mausoleum produces a formidable specter, it still won't be your match. Chinyu's eyes brightened. He glanced at the cautious Nanyuan king. His thoughts raced, and he coldly said, I will personally take the divine stone from the sea mausoleum and give it to you. But the Bull clan must promise me that they will not covet the capital city in the future. The Nanyuan king was overjoyed. I will follow Senior's instructions. Before, he didn't know that the direct descendants of the royal family had such a great backer. But now that he knew, who would dare to have any other thoughts? Chinyu lightly said, I hope that the Bull clan can remember their promise. At the latest tomorrow at sunset, I will give you the divine stone. The Nanyuan king's smile stiffened. From these light words, he could sense a cruel and bloody flavor. His face paled a bit. He nodded again and again, bowed, and left. What? Big Brother Chinyu, you want to go to the sea mausoleum? No, you're not a sea folk. If you go, you will anger the souls of all our slumbering ancestors. That is far too dangerous. Sangyea exploded with anger as she heard this. She shook her head like a rattle drum. Chinyu's heart warmed. Now you know how dangerous it is, and yet you still dare to agree? Little girl, if it weren't for me stopping you, you might already be dead. Sangyea stuck out her tongue. I am a direct descendant of the royal family. Perhaps the ancestors of my clan will be lenient. Don't change the subject. In short, I absolutely will not agree to this. Qin Yu smiled. Don't worry, I am living well. I haven't reached the point where I want to commit suicide. Since I dare to enter the sea mausoleum, that means I have absolute confidence in myself. His lips curved up in a faint smile. As for those ancestors of yours who have been dead for countless years and still refuse to fade away, they had best pray that they don't provoke me. Otherwise, I fear their fates will be miserable. Undying strange laughter spread into his mind. He knew that his little scheme couldn't be hidden from his master's eyes. In the eyes of others, those specters were extremely terrifying and nearly impossible to kill. But to Undying, they were nothing more than fat lambs jumping about. Now that he could openly enter and eat and drink to his heart's content, just thinking about it left him excited. Sang Ye had a suspicious look in her eyes. Really, in truth, she didn't care too much about the fate of her ancestor specters. These restless ancestors had stirred up a great deal of disturbances, so it was long past time for them to be put to rest. Qin Yu casually said, "If I personally take action, there is nothing I can't accomplish. Little girl, what do you know? Just wait and see my triumphant return." Sang Ye hesitated for a long time. She had Qin Yu guarantee it again and again, and she almost swore an oath before she reluctantly believed him. She turned and informed the Sea Sovereign. The Sea Sovereign certainly understood what she was thinking. Leaving the Godstone in the capital city was a disaster. He expressed his endless gratitude towards Qin Yu for helping them. As for whether or not humans entering the sea mausoleum was an offense and disrespect to the sea races, it was best not to have such brainless thoughts. Everyone here was a smart person, so no one would be stupid enough to jump out and make a ruckus. Like this, the matter was settled. The Sea Sovereign promised Sang Ye that no matter what Qin Yu needed, she could tell him. The sea races wouldn't have any objections. Sang Ye accurately conveyed the Sea Sovereign's meaning to Qin Yu. She was just short of telling him that if he wanted anything, he could ask for it. If he opened his mouth as wide as possible, it wouldn't be a problem even if he bit off a piece of the heavens. Qin Yu smiled and shook his head. "There's no need. I can do it myself." Supman's eyes brightened, and the stiff smile on his face immediately brightened. His heart was filled with excitement and ecstasy from escaping death. On the way here just now, his heart had nearly split open in pain. As he thought about how His Majesty had to give away all the wealth he had accumulated over the years, Supman found it hard to breathe. He never thought that Qin Yu would actually turn over a new leaf. When he returned, he would definitely pay his respects to all the gods and Buddhas in the world and thank them for their protection. Sang Ye anxiously said, "Big brother Qin Yu, how can you not want anything? The sea mausoleum is so dangerous. I know that in Uncle's treasury, there's a set of 13 soul-linking pearls that can protect the soul, as well as a blazing sun armor that can resist Een energy. These are all treasures that can help you. There are also the soul-gathering bead, God-slaying spike, demon flower seed, and so forth. I've recorded them all in this jade slip. Hurry up and take a look." Supman looked at the jade slip in Sang Ye's hand that was almost touching Qin Yu's eyeballs. He couldn't breathe and nearly fainted. "My dear Crown Princess, His Majesty's things will be yours in the future. Even if you want to squander your wealth, you shouldn't do it in such a way. He already said that he didn't want it, and yet we still gave it away and even made a list. Just thinking about it makes my heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys ache." But at this time, there was no room for him to speak. He winked so hard that his face was cramping up, but Sang Ye pretended not to see him. Supman wanted to cry. Qin Yu chuckled and reached out a hand. He took the jade slip and probed it with his divine sense. There really was a lot of things here. If he really asked for them according to Sang Ye's list, then even if the Sea Sovereign's treasury wasn't emptied out, he would still be able to walk around freely. This little girl, she had completely sided with an outsider. Although Qin Yu was gratified, he still smiled and shook his head. There's really no need. In the past, his cultivation was low and his experience was limited. When he entered the Sea Sovereign's treasury, he felt that there were treasures everywhere and that there were good things everywhere. He wished that he could hold them all in his arms. Now, To put it bluntly, even if he gave the entire treasury to Chinyu, he wouldn't think it was heavy. He had scraped the sea of purgatory for dozens of years and had countless good things, so how could he possibly care about these trifling things? Seeing Sang-Yi pouting an unhappy expression, Chinyu rubbed his eyebrows and said, I remember, there really is something I want to ask Soup Man for. Beneath the royal palace, there's a vine that grows. In the past, I once received a favor from it. I asked that Soup Man report back to His Majesty and have him return its freedom. Soup Man let out a long breath and quickly nodded. Mr. Chin, rest assured that this old servant will remember this and will definitely handle it properly for you. He hesitated for a moment and then dryly smiled. I wonder if Mr. Chin has anything else you need? Chinyu waved his hand. Soup Man quickly bowed and then turned to leave. What nonsense! If he didn't leave now, what if he changed his mind later? Big brother Chinyu, Sang-Yi hatefully said, why don't you grow up? When a person walks in this world, how can they not have something they can take with them? Even if you don't need it, you can still take it and casually trade it for a great deal of money. Uncle has never been so generous to anyone. What a great opportunity, and yet you let it slip away like this. I'm going to die of anger. Chinyu laughed. Laugh. You're still laughing? If you regret it later, don't blame me for not warning you. This little girl. Chinyu lifted a hand and took out a storage ring. You are now the crown princess and will inherit the throne of the sea races in the future. At that time, I don't know where I will be, so I'll give you a gift in advance. Take a look. I'm sure you'll like it. Sang-Yi humphed several times. She finally couldn't resist the temptation of the gift. She received the storage ring and then cried out in alarm. Inside was a complete phoenix crown and robe. This was a treasure that Chinyu had snatched from an extremely fierce monster beast from the Purgatory Sea. If it could be kept by Chinyu alone, it wasn't too much to call a treasure. Moreover, with his current experience, he could imagine just how precious it was. Sang-Yi could feel the powerful aura rippling from the phoenix crown and robe. Her heart shook, and she quickly regained her composure. She quickly said, No, this treasure is too precious. I cannot take it. Chinyu shook his head. Just now you nearly gifted over half of His Majesty's wealth to me, and now you want to refuse my gift? Seeing her shake her head again, Chinyu had no choice but to take out his own storage ring. Then there was no then. Sang-Yi was clearly dazzled by the treasure. Her face flushed red, and she dizzily sat in a chair, mumbling to herself and giggling from time to time. Chinyu raised a hand to cover his eyes. How shameful! He had forgotten how excited he had been when he was searching for treasures. Chinyu entered the sea mausoleum. Of course, before he entered, he had to accept Sang-Yi's bombardment of words. To sum it up, Big Brother Chin, you had to be careful and come out safely. Otherwise, I will go in and look for you. If you don't want me to die, then you should live well. Her endless chatter disturbed his heart. Chinyu felt his face stiffen. He quickly shook her off and flew in. The surroundings immediately quieted down. The sky was dark and gloomy. Vast tracts of fog floated in the air, tumbling about like living creatures. Chinyu had long suspected that the sea mausoleum was an independent space. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the array formation was, it would be impossible to imprison so many powerful specters. Now, it seemed that his guess was correct. His thoughts stirred and his divine sense erupted, howling deep into the sea mausoleum. Even if he was confident in his own strength, it wasn't a bad thing to be a bit more cautious. Soon, Chinyu's complexion became dignified. His eyes were deep, like a bottomless abyss. The space that the sea mausoleum was in was much larger than he had imagined. In particular, there were many powerful auras in the depths. When Chinyu's divine sense arrived, these powerful auras instantly responded. Before he even probed to the end, he knew that this sea mausoleum was far more terrifying than he had imagined. If that girl Sang-Yi came in, she wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Chinyu took a deep breath and calmed his shaking heart. Then, he composed himself. With his current cultivation, as long as he didn't court death, it would be difficult to kill him. Now, besides the divine stones, He was even more interested in this sea mausoleum. There seemed to be some extraordinary secret hidden within. The specters had strange methods, but in the end, they were only transformed from souls that hadn't scattered yet. Their pure soul strength was actually strong to such a degree, and it was clear that they had given birth to a new will. If someone said that there was nothing strange about this sea mausoleum, you wouldn't believe it even if he cut off its head. Thinking about it was useless. Since he had come here, he might as well take a look with his own eyes and find out. Shwa. Yu's thoughts stirred. His body turned into a phantom, and he howled deep into the sea mausoleum at an astonishing speed. The aura of life carried with it a sweet and juicy flesh and blood. In this world of death, it was even more striking than a lighthouse in the dark. Thus, Yu soon encountered trouble. A mass of gray fog quietly floated in the air. As he approached, it suddenly split open, revealing a mouth covered with pale white fangs that ruthlessly bit at him. This fog actually hid an extremely terrifying specter. It controlled a mortal body that had lost its flesh and blood, but was tempered by the aura of death, making it even more powerful. Yu punched out. With a loud explosion, the specter was sent flying away. He frowned. It wasn't that he was startled by the specter's strength, but that he hadn't sensed it at all before it attacked. This specter revealed its true appearance. It was the skeleton of a crocodile, but its body had been cut in half, leaving only the lower half of its body. Even so, it was still over a dozen meters long and had a horrifying appearance. At this time, it shook its head and opened its mouth to roar. Its figure flashed as it was about to rush over, but at this moment its body froze. Kacha! A crack appeared on its hard skull. Then, it rapidly spread out and collapsed. In just a breath of time, a deep fist mark had appeared. Pa! The crocodile specter's giant body crashed into the ground, kicking up a great deal of dust. The soul fire in its empty eye sockets would soon be extinguished. Fluctuations appeared beneath Yu's feet. Undying rushed out like a cheetah, shouting that food was precious and that it was shameful to waste it. He took a deep breath. Then, without making any other movements, the soul fire that was about to collapse turned into a thin line that sank into his mouth. Undying patted his belly and smacked his lips. It was clear he was satisfied with the meal. This is truly worthy of being a specter bred in this world of death for so many years. The taste is delicious and the aftertaste lingers. It is truly unforgettable. Yu's lips twitched. Ever since he borrowed the power of the great Tao tree and was reborn from the land of death, Undying had become a bit abnormal. Although he was normally taciturn, as long as he opened his mouth, he could make others feel the ever-present excitement of letting go of himself. If this fellow's aura hadn't changed, Yu would have suspected that his body had been seized. A bell suddenly rang out from within his soul space. Within Lin Ming's soul space, a bell suddenly rang out. Mei Mei, who still hadn't emerged from her weakened state, strongly protested. Yu coughed. Leave a portion of the spectral strength for Mei Mei Leave a portion for Purple Moon as well. Even if he didn't say anything, he still had to be fair. As for that bastard Blue Sun in the Dantian Sea, he didn't even help in such a critical moment, so he deserved to not have anything to eat. Undying turned around and bowed like a gentleman. Yes, I will obey your orders, master. Here it comes again. Once this was over, he would have to ask Undying where he felt uncomfortable. Being sick wasn't something to be afraid of, but he had to be treated. Let's go. Yu's figure moved, and he continued forwards. Undying followed behind him. But after just a few steps, he suddenly stopped. What is it? Undying pointed a finger. Master, there is a specter hiding there. Yu furrowed his eyebrows. It didn't provoke us. Undying shook his head. Master is mistaken. The grass and trees quietly grow on the ground without doing anything, but the cattle and sheep still want to eat them. This has nothing to do with right or wrong, but whether or not there is a need. It wasn't easy for us to find a place filled with supplements. So how could we enter a treasure mountain and leave empty-handed? Moreover, Mei Mei, Purple Moon, and I are all very weak right now. We urgently need Master to place food in us. Qin Yu's lips twitched. For Undying to even say words like place food in, this fellow's illness wasn't light at all. Arguing with someone who was sick was an absolutely stupid decision. Thus, Qin Yu simply punched out his fist. A powerful strength crossed through space and smashed apart a distant mountain. With a pitiful cry, a specter hidden inside was blown away. Its pale white bones began to disintegrate in midair. Undying shouted out loud, "Long live Master!" He had already rushed forwards. With a wave of his hand, the soul fire split into 3, and he swallowed his portion. As for the remaining 2 portions, they were pulled up by an invisible strength. They howled into Qin Yu's eyebrows and were cleanly eaten up in the blink of an eye. Undying briskly walked back. "Master, this world of the dead is extremely large, and we still have a long way to go. Let's hurry along." A foreboding premonition rose in Qin Yu's heart. As he thought, the following journey directly turned into a blissful journey for 3 gluttons. "Master, please wait. There's one here. Master, there's one more. Master, there's a great discovery. There are 2 of them hiding in one nest. Master." Qin Yu was already numb to this. As long as there were specters, they couldn't escape Undying's senses. He thought about refusing, but before Undying could say anything, the 2 in his soul space had already rebelled. The always cold and aloof purple moon sent him a cold thought. If he didn't provide the strength of specters, then he could forget about her helping him in the future. Qin Yu could only compromise. Thus, he decided to hurry up and go to hell. He didn't take a straight path at all. Instead, he took a winding path. Undying's slogan was loud and clear: "Food is precious. Wasting it is shameful." Occasionally, he would turn his head and look at the brighter skies behind him. Qin Yu couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. He had entered the sea mausoleum to take the godstones, causing the sea sovereign and the others to be deeply grateful to him. But if they knew that the fellow they let in had swept away all the specters of their ancestors, wouldn't they turn hostile? But there was nothing he could do about it. There are difficulties everywhere in life, so I hope that everyone can understand each other. Cough, cough. Regarding the matter of the godstones, he had to be swift and decisive. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have any face left. Because he had underestimated Undying, Mimi, and Purple Moon's appetites, his journey had been greatly affected. Qin Yu's original plan to settle this matter in a single day naturally turned into a bubble. Outside the sea mausoleum, Sang Ye's eyes were red. She nervously looked at the sea sovereign, as if saying that if he dared to say anything bad, she would immediately cry in front of him. Across from her, the sea sovereign held the sacrificial disc in his hand. After sensing for a long time, he opened his eyes and revealed a strange expression. Sang Ye's heart skipped a beat. "Your Majesty, how is it? Have you found Big Brother Qin Yu's aura yet? How come he hasn't returned yet?" The sea sovereign hesitated for a moment. He said, "Yet, don't worry. This solitude's senses are a bit inaccurate. I asked Mr. Turtle to also give it a try. Only then will I be confident." As he spoke, he handed over the disc. Mr. Turtle had already noticed the sea sovereign's expression. He uneasily received it. No matter how worried Sangye was, she could only forcefully endure it and maintain her silence. After a long period of silence, Mr. Turtle opened his eyes. His expression was exactly the same as the sea sovereign's. The 2 glanced at each other. Ruler and minister had been together for so many years that they could understand each other's thoughts with a single glance. They didn't know how to express themselves. Was it anger or joy? However, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. This matter absolutely could not be leaked out. Otherwise, how could they continue living in the world? "Grandpa Turtle, what is it? Say something." The old turtle coughed. "Crown Princess, there is no need to worry. Mr. Qin, he is fine. It's just that it's difficult to travel through the sea mausoleum, so his journey has been delayed." Sang Ye relaxed. She looked at the sea sovereign and saw her uncle nod. Only then did she truly feel relieved. "Big Brother Qin Yu, what kind of big words are you talking about? He clearly can't rush back in a day." She thought of something else. She hurriedly asked, Grandpa Turtle, when will Big Brother Chenyu return? The old turtle's face stiffened. He quickly coughed to cover it up. The sea sovereign was left speechless. He thought that he would have to ask Chenyu just how much he was planning to plunder the solemn sea mausoleum. In a single day, the aura of specters within the sea mausoleum had actually fallen by nearly 10%. This rate was far too horrifying. Seeing His Majesty look up at the skies, clearly unwilling to speak, the old turtle squeezed out a smile. Crown Princess, rest assured that Mr. Chen's aura is like a rainbow, and his vitality is boundless. He hasn't suffered any damage at all. Cough, cough. He will return in at most several days. With great difficulty, he managed to fool Sang Ye. As the ruler and minister left the sea mausoleum, their smiles immediately vanished. When they entered the grand hall and sat across from each other, they couldn't help but reveal wonderful expressions. The sea sovereign bit his cheeks and said, "Mr. Chen, what do you think this solitude should do?" In these past years, the sea mausoleum had stirred up many events and was gradually becoming a hidden danger to the capital city. But after all, generations of the royal family's ancestors were buried within, as well as all sorts of great meritorious officials. It was a sacred land of the sea races. If it was only killing a small number of specters and taking away the divine stones to erase the hidden dangers, then that would be acceptable. But what Chenyu was doing now was simply a carpet sweep, an indiscriminate sweep. The two of them could clearly sense that wherever he went, there wasn't even the slightest specter aura left behind. It was so clean that it made one want to cry. Mr. Turtle earnestly said, "Your Majesty, you must endure. We offended Chenyu in the past, but it was all thanks to Her Highness the Crown Princess being close to him that he had some scruples and didn't pursue this matter. You cannot give him any chance to take advantage of this situation to cause trouble. Otherwise, the capital city will be in danger." The sea sovereign was silent for a long time. Could this solitude only be able to stare blankly on? This was no different from someone digging up their ancestral graves. Mr. Turtle was incomparably embarrassed. He thought for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, you can only think of this as a condition for Chenyu to take action. I believe that the heroic spirits of our ancestors are also aware of this and are willing to sacrifice their souls in exchange for the stability of the capital city and the inheritance of our bloodline." His expression was solemn and respectful. He said, "In order to protect us, our ancestors have paid such a heavy price. We must remember this in our hearts. I sincerely ask your Majesty to hold a grand ceremony after the matter of the divine stones is concluded to repay the great graciousness of our ancestors." The sea sovereign sucked in a deep breath. Mr. Turtle is right. This solitude will gather the entire sea races to pray and pray for our deceased ancestors. The ruler and minister both blushed red with shame. But for better or worse, they had found a way out of this awkward situation. In truth, the two of them knew better than anyone else that the sea mausoleum was already too big to deal with. It had gradually become a great hidden danger that threatened the capital city, and if it wasn't changed, future generations would inevitably suffer. Today, Chenyu had taken action and cleaned up the entire sea mausoleum. If this hidden danger was eliminated, logically speaking, this was an absolutely good thing for the sea races. But even if this was the truth, they couldn't admit it. Something like face, although it was useless and sometimes a burden, they still had to protect it. 7 days had passed since Chenyu entered the sea mausoleum. Even if the world of the sea mausoleum was large enough and countless specters were born, it still couldn't withstand this sort of brutal harvesting. The current sea mausoleum had undergone tremendous changes compared to when Chenyu first entered. The skies had brightened by more than just a little bit. Even the fog that gathered together was hard to find, and the aura of specters had nearly vanished. Besides the deathly silence, there wasn't much difference between this place and the outside world. He stopped and looked up at the ends of his vision. Over there, the skies were pitch black like ink. Terrifying specter auras pierced through the world like wolves and sheep. This was the deepest depths of the sea mausoleum, the only place that Qin hadn't stepped into yet. Buried here was the most powerful ancestor of the sea races, and also the place where the specter aura was the most terrifying. The terrifying ancestor specters had already sensed that he was an intruder. It was only because he was imprisoned that he couldn't break free. The specter aura that soared into the skies was a declaration of war filled with killing intent. They were waiting for Qin to walk into their trap. Undying clenched his jaws, his body shivering. Food is precious, and wasting it is shameful. Master, what are we waiting for? Chapter 593. The innermost depths of the sea mausoleum didn't seem too far away, but the truth was that this was only an illusion. Space was bent, twisted, and stacked together, making the distance one had to travel far longer. Moreover, as they approached, there was a certain aura in the air that made one feel restless and oppressed. Qin revealed a dignified expression. He was even more sure of his previous speculations. The sea mausoleum, where the ancestors of the sea races were buried, was absolutely extraordinary. Through this sea mausoleum, he could faintly guess how powerful the capital city's sea races were in the distant past. But why hadn't they fallen to their current situation and been directly bullied by the bold branch bloodline? There must be some hidden reason he didn't know. Perhaps he could find the answer he wanted in the deepest depths of the sea mausoleum. His steps weren't fast or slow, but with every step he took, he crossed a vast expanse of space. Qin Yu's speed was astonishing. After half a day, he finally crossed the final distance. At this time, a giant black stone tablet appeared in his line of sight. It was only the height of a person, and its surface was covered with the marks of the passing of time. Many parts of it had fallen off. On the front of the stone tablet were large blood-red characters. The world of the dead. All living beings are forbidden to enter. As Qin Yu's eyes fell on these blood-red characters, his heart skipped a beat, and a terrifying feeling rose in his heart. To him, each character was like a blood-red vortex that released a powerful, pulling strength, wanting to swallow his soul. With a stuffy cough, Qin Yu closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he looked at the blood-red characters on the stone tablet. That terrifying feeling had already disappeared, as if it were just an illusion. But Qin Yu didn't relax at all. As he looked at the pitch-black skies above his head, his eyes became increasingly dignified. Undying half-squatted down, a bit hesitant. Then he reached out a hand and pressed it against the black stone tablet. His body shook, and he fell silent. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. "Undying, what is it?" Undying said, "Master, this stone tablet's aura is very familiar to me, as if I've seen it somewhere before." Qin Yu asked, "What do you think?" Undying shook his head. "No, I just feel that it's familiar." He hesitated for a moment. "But my intuition tells me that there is danger ahead. Master must be careful." Qin Yu took a deep breath. "Let's go. I want to see just what secrets this sea mausoleum is hiding." His tone was firm, but his heart was even more cautious. Undying came from the unfathomable mysteries. Since even he felt danger, he wouldn't lower his guard in the slightest. He stepped over the stone tablet. His body was a little numb, as if a faint electric current had passed through him. He focused his mind and sensed that there was nothing wrong with his body. Then he continued forwards. The expected storm of attacks did not appear. In the silence, a wide and orderly road appeared in front of him, leading straight ahead. Qin Yu didn't hesitate. He continued walking along the road. A moment later, a towering city appeared in his line of sight. The city gates were wide open, and there were armored guards standing guard. Many figures of the sea race walked in and out of the city, making it seem especially prosperous. Qin Yu revealed a look of surprise. Deep within the sea mausoleum, in the world of the dead, there was actually such a large city. Undying's figure moved, fusing into the shadows. "Master, I will hide for now. You can act according to the situation." He was far more useful in the dark than in the light. Qin Yu nodded and walked towards the city gates. When he arrived, the guards at the city gates and the sea race members that came in and out didn't show any abnormalities. Not too far away, there was an old man carrying a pole. He smiled and nodded, his attitude warm and genial. Following behind him was a pair of young brother and sister. They were a bit afraid of strangers, and half of their bodies were hidden behind the old man. They peeked out, their eyes full of curiosity. One of the city guards revealed a pair of huge pincers. He glared and shouted, "Outsider, what are you doing here?" Chinyu lightly said, "I've come to take something." "How dare you?" The pincer guard was enraged. "This is my king's capital city, and everything here belongs to my king. You dare to demand it from me? I advise you to leave immediately. Otherwise you will die without a grave. Don't regret this." Chinyu shook his head. "If I can't take what I want, I won't leave." Suddenly, there was a commotion within the city gates. The sea race members that came in and out of the city quickly moved to the side. A group of sea race guards surrounded a gorgeous carriage that stopped outside the city gates. A steward with a mustache and meticulously combed hair walked over. He respectfully bowed. "Honored guest has come from afar. It is impolite of me not to welcome you. My master has prepared a banquet. Please follow me." As he spoke, he drew to the side and respectfully opened the carriage door. Chinyu's thoughts stirred. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Without fear, he boarded the carriage and sat down on a soft and pure white couch. The carriage turned and passed through the city gates, heading straight towards the center of the city. The curtains of the carriage windows were lifted by the wind. One could see that on both sides of the street, there were countless shops and countless sea folk coming and going. It was a lively and bustling scene. The city was large, but the deeper one went, the fewer sea folk there were. The courtyards gradually became larger and more luxurious and dignified. Finally, the carriage stopped in front of a giant courtyard. The main doors were already open, and a group of beautiful maids were respectfully waiting outside with lanterns in their hands. The carriage stopped. The steward opened the door and knelt on the ground on his own initiative, acting as a stepping stone for Chinyu to leave. Chinyu had a calm expression. He stepped on the steward's back and landed on the ground. His eyes swept over the towering gates in front of him. Although he didn't speak, he was indifferent and composed. A noble and untouchable aura naturally exuded from him. It left one in awe and awe. "We've been waiting for honored guests for a long time. The banquet has already begun. Honored guest, please follow us." A group of maids stepped forwards and bowed. Then, they turned and led the way. 2 rows of gorgeous lanterns were carried in their hands. They emitted a warm yellow light, exuding a warm and comfortable aura. These maids were all incomparably beautiful. Their bodies were soft and curvaceous. As they walked, they were like swaying willow branches, causing one's heart to heat up. But Chinyu only glanced at them and then followed behind. He walked up the stairs to the main entrance and stepped in. Hiss, that faint numbing feeling, like a faint electric current sweeping over him, appeared once more. Chinyu paused for a moment before calming down. The courtyard was deep and unfathomably deep. The beautiful scenery was shrouded in mist, adding to the tranquil beauty. The sound of stringed instruments spread out from the front. It was soft and elegant like a spring breeze, raising one's spirits. After turning a long corridor and passing through a screen wall, a grand hall appeared in front of him. After passing through 13 open doors, he could see that a lively banquet was being held within. There were many guests drinking wine and chatting merrily. Maids in beautiful dresses shuttled back and forth like butterflies fluttering through the crowd. The performers were 13 skimpily dressed sea folk. They had some sort of translucent wings growing out of their backs that softly wrapped around their bodies. As they danced, they would open and close, occasionally revealing the beauty of spring, leaving one with an endless aftertaste. At the highest point of the grand hall sat a dignified middle-aged sea folk. He clapped his hands and laughed. "Our honored guest has arrived." The singing and dancing stopped. The beautiful sea folk women turned and drew to the side. All the maids knelt on the ground, their heads lowered to reveal their snow-white necks. Countless eyes gathered on Chinyu from all directions. Some were curious, some were surprised, and some were appreciative. Of course, most of them were icy cold indifference. Chinyu treated all of this as air. He stepped into the grand hall and cupped his hands together. Uninvited guest, I have disturbed your banquet. I apologize for my lack of manners. The middle-aged sea folk laughed. Honored guest, there is no need to be like this. This banquet was especially held to welcome you. He reached out a hand and pointed to an empty seat on the lower left. Honored guest, please enter. Chinyu said, then I shall accept. His attitude was calm. Beneath the countless eyes, he walked deep into the grand hall and sat down in an empty seat. The middle-aged sea folk's laughter became even louder. He picked up a cup of wine in front of him and said, everyone, let us raise our cups and welcome our honored guest. In the grand hall, countless arms were raised. However, no one spoke, making this scene seem strange. The maids at the side carried wine jugs with both hands and poured white jade wine cups for Chinyu. The amber wine emitted a rich fragrance. Chinyu picked up the jade cup. Thank you for your hospitality. He looked up and drank. Great. In the grand hall, the middle-aged sea folks' laughter echoed out. Let's drink together. The singing and dancing continued. The dancing beauty's eyes were like little hooks that constantly fluttered towards Chinyu. Honored guest, although my group of dancers doesn't have much of a background, they have been spoiled by me for all these years, and their horizons have been astonishingly high. You are the first person to have moved the hearts of my 13 dancers. For this, you should drink several more cups. The middle-aged sea folk's voice was bright and hearty. Chinyu lightly said, Your Majesty is too kind. I don't dare. Humph. What do you mean you don't dare? Your Majesty's words are not wrong at all. Several tables away, a thin sea folk sneered. He lifted a cup of wine and said, I will drink a cup with the honored guest. Honored guest, you won't sweep away my face, right? Chinyu glanced at the maids beside him. Fill it up. He raised his cup and drained it. Good. Honored guest, you're straightforward. Come, let me offer another cup to the honored guest. Good things come in pairs. Drinking wine requires two. How can you only drink a single cup? For a time, there were countless people urging him to drink. Chinyu didn't refuse any of them, and soon drank the entire pot of wine. Perhaps it was because he kept pouring wine, but the maid beside him that was holding the pot blushed red, and beads of sweat began to drip down her forehead. The banquet was bustling with noise and excitement. Only when Chinyu drank the entire pot of wine did the number of toasts gradually decrease. However, from beginning to end, Chinyu didn't even touch a single mouthful of the exquisite and tempting dishes that were placed on the table. As he placed down the wine cup, there was a light smacking sound. Although it was weak, it instantly drowned out the sounds of singing and dancing, causing the graceful and alluring dancers to stiffen. Then, Chinyu's calm voice sounded out. I have already accepted everyone's good intentions. Now, it is time for the banquet to come to an end and get to the main topic. The hall suddenly quieted down. The sea folk that had been laughing and laughing just a moment ago had now restrained their expressions, as if they were wooden statues. The lively banquet hall suddenly became a bit more gloomy. In the main seat, a middle-aged sea folk smiled and broke the silence. The host follows the guest. Since honored guest does not wish to delay any longer, then please speak. Chinyu calmly said, I have come to take away the godstone that fell into the sea mausoleum not too long ago. Insolence! A sea folk roared. The godstone contains great good fortune. It is a gift from the heavens to my king, yet you dare to covet it? Another sea folk gnashed his teeth. I already guessed that a human like you had ill intentions. The godstone is a supreme treasure bestowed by the heavens. In this world, only my king has the qualifications to hold it. You lowly character, what right do you have to ask for it? Chinyu was expressionless. Just now, I will drink all of your toasts. He stretched out a hand and spread open his fingers. Drops of black liquid fell to the ground, each drop filled with countless ghostly faces that howled and tumbled about. Is this enough? Every cup of wine was an invisible killing tool. It could wither away one's soul and annihilate it. The complexions of the sea folk changed, revealing a look of dread. But soon, someone sneered. To us, this wine is a rare saint-grade tonic. You didn't have the fortune to enjoy it, so do you want to blame us? Chinyu drew back his hand. He looked around the hall and lightly said, "It looks like you are all prepared to be unreasonable. Then, there is no need for us to continue speaking." In the main seat, the silent middle-aged sea folk suddenly said, "Honored guest, there is no need to be angry. In truth, this is only a test for us. If honored guest is fine after drinking, then you have the qualifications to exchange with us." Chapter 594. Qin Yu turn around. "Your Majesty, what request do you have? Please speak." The middle-aged sea folk smiled. "To honor guest, this matter is as simple as lifting a finger. In the corners of this residence, there are 9 stone pillars. As long as honored guest makes a move, any one of them can be moved away." Qin Yu was silent for a long time. He frowned. "Your Majesty's request is a bit difficult. The 9 stone pillars are connected to each other, so how could they be moved so easily?" The middle-aged sea folks' smile widened. "Honored guest, please rest assured that I have detailed records of the 9 stone pillars. The contents are all in a jade slip. As long as honored guest follows the steps, you can easily accomplish it." Qin Yu didn't sense anything wrong. He took the jade slip and probed it with his divine sense. A moment later, he opened his eyes. The middle-aged sea folk said, "How is it? Honored guest should know by now that what you want to do isn't too difficult. As long as you agree, I can make an oath right now and give the Godstone to honored guest." Qin Yu said, "Your Majesty, since you have such a clear understanding of the 9 stone pillars, why would you need an outsider like me to do it? You could just order someone to move them away." The middle-aged sea folk's face stiffened and his smile faded. "This isn't something that honored guest should be concerned about. Now, I ask honored guest to make a choice. Will you agree to my conditions, or will you stay here forever and accompany me?" Qin Yu looked at him for a long time. Then, he suddenly said, "Why? The one who built these stone pillars in the past should have been your Majesty. I believe that you should have already predicted what would happen later." The middle-aged sea folk had no expression. "Honored guest is drunk." Qin Yu shook his head. "It is best to keep these stone pillars. If even one is moved, I fear this world will fall into chaos." "Shut up." The middle-aged sea folk's expression suddenly turned fierce. "I don't care what nonsense you are spouting. Remember the choice I am giving you. Take the Godstone and leave, or stay here forever. Think carefully about your answer. I will not give you a second chance." Qin Yu lightly said, "I won't move the stone pillars, but the Godstone. I also want it." He stood up, and the phantom of a purple crescent moon appeared in the depths of his eyes. The world in front of him suddenly changed. Whereas this luxurious mansion, where he was now, he was in a vast and horrifying tomb. Within the temple, there were well-dressed sea folk with cold and arrogant expressions. Now, they were nothing but pale white skeletons draped in rotting robes. Deep within the tomb, there was a massive mass of black fog. A giant bone dragon roared out, "Kill him!" A slender bone hand shot out like a bolt of lightning, grasping at Qin Yu's throat. The incomparably charming and charming maid that had been serving him was now nothing more than a skeleton. Unfortunately, before her hand could approach Qin Yu, it was shaken away by a formidable strength. It disintegrated in midair, turning into broken bones. However, the dismembered skeletons hopped together and formed a body in the blink of an eye. Their hands hugged the skull and pressed on the neck. After a few cracking sounds, they came back to life. "Sir, you are so ruthless. These sisters really like you. Since you don't agree to His Majesty's conditions, then stay with us sisters and live happily ever after." The 13 beautiful dancers were formed from the souls of countless women. They wove together like snakes, forming a composite body. These women's souls wriggled about. Heads popped out one after another, all of them saying the same words. It was strange and horrifying. Whoosh, whoosh. The 13 dancers howled as they flew outwards. Each one of them landed on a tomb door. Their bodies were like folded sheets of paper as they unfolded and sealed the tomb door shut. Within the temple, specters rose up one after another. Specter flames danced in their eye sockets as they gathered from all directions. There was also a mass of pure specter strength that turned into fierce, ghostly faces that howled and danced in the air. In the blink of an eye, Qin Yu was surrounded in 3 layers and 3 layers. Bang! The berserk power was like a great tide, erupting in an instant, engulfing the departed spirits and sending them flying. Pitter-patter, countless bones fell to the ground. Even the sturdy bodies of the specters rapidly disintegrated beneath the impact of this horrifying strength. But these specters were the same as the one that had been smashed to pieces. After they fell to the ground, their bodies began to automatically reform. In just several breaths of time, the scattered bones reformed, their auras not weakening in the slightest. The ancient dragon's voice echoed out from deep within the tomb. Human, this is the world of the dead. We can obtain its protection and will never be killed. Although you are powerful, you will definitely pay a painful price for your foolish decision. I will obtain your soul and place it in the flames of purgatory. I will burn it for millions, tens of millions of years. I will have you suffer in pain and despair for all eternity, never to be freed. Qin Yu frowned, a dignified look in his eyes. These specters were on a completely different level from the ones he had killed before. He noticed that even if he increased the intensity of his strength and crushed the bodies of the specters, even the crushed bones would instantly reform. Although there were countless cracks on the surface of the bones, their hardness didn't decrease in the least. Humph! With a cold snort, Qin Yu stepped forwards. A shockwave visible to the naked eye stirred up a cloud of dust that swept out in all directions, sending the specters flying away. His feet exerted strength, and the ground began to crack. In the blink of an eye, countless cracks spread out like a giant spiderweb. A formidable strength pushed Qin Yu's body. Like a boulder falling from a mountain peak, he howled towards the entrance of the tomb. He lifted a hand and punched out. A wild strength surged out like a flood dragon, smashing into the tomb door formed from the souls of these women. The terrifying impact caused their souls to wildly bulge outwards, stretching them like rubber bands. Io, what a cruel Lang Jun. You almost beat me to death. Hee, now that I've tasted it, it's actually very comfortable. Husband, use a bit more strength. Husband, hurry up and come. I can't wait any longer. Qin Yu fell to the ground, his eyebrows furrowed even tighter. He had no idea what sort of mutation these women's souls had undergone, but they actually possessed such astonishing toughness. It was impossible to break them. The ancient dragon's voice sounded out once more. You cannot escape. You are destined to stay here and accompany us forever. Stay here forever. Accompany us in suffering. Even after 10 million years, we still cannot free ourselves. Accompany us. The specters laughed and roared as they wildly rushed forwards. Qin Yu coldly sneered. Sorry, but I have no interest in a bunch of bones and specters. If you want someone to accompany you, then go find someone else. He lifted a hand, and the space in his palm gently trembled. A bell appeared from within. Its surface was a bit damaged, but it was still as bright as new. With a flick of his wrist, the clear ringing of the bell fell into Qin Yu's ears. His mind instantly became clear, and his will became unprecedentedly focused. But to the specters in the tomb, this ringing of the bell was a terrifying attack that tore at their hearts and organs. They cried out in pain, and their bodies began to explode. The women's souls on the 13 tomb doors were able to resist for a bit longer. But in the end, they weren't able to resist the strength of the cosmic sea-cross bell. This was the world's most precious treasure for souls. Not only did it have a terrifying effect on living souls, but it also had a terrifying might towards specters. Stop shaking around, and we'll let you out. No, stop. We were wrong. We beg you to forgive us. Qin Yu remained expressionless, unmoved at all. His wrist shook even faster, and the ringing of the bell became even more urgent. Ah! Countless women screamed out at the same time. The 13 tomb doors exploded, turning into a white fog. Tens of thousands of women flew out from the fog, bowing to Chinyu in gratitude before turning to ash and vanishing from sight. No wonder the tomb doors formed by these women were so tough. Each one was formed from the souls of countless women, refined and fused together. To these women, this was an indescribable torture. They had been fused together by an evil technique and would never be able to free themselves. It was no wonder they still bowed to Chinyu after they were killed. This was because to them, death was the best possible result. Chinyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. He stepped forwards and rushed out of the main tomb door. But he was still in the tomb. The ancient dragon's pained and cruel roars echoed out from the main tomb. You absolutely cannot let him escape. Otherwise, all of you will die. Countless specters gathered from all directions. In just several breaths of time, Chinyu's line of sight was completely occupied by them. There were so many that it left one's scalp tingling. Chinyu closed his eyes and opened them again. The purple moon phantom in the depths of his pupils shined even brighter. His vision pierced through the thick fog, and he found the exit to the tomb. He stepped forwards, and his figure burst out like a bolt of lightning. The cosmic sea crossbell strength was limited, and it couldn't be used without limit. It could only be used in a critical moment. Luckily, with his cultivation, even though there were many specters, they were only a bit troublesome. They simply couldn't stop him from advancing. Within his chest, his heart fiercely beat, turning into a wild source of strength. His blood wildly raced through his body, and an inconceivably thick blood vitality gathered above his head, forming the phantom of a giant demon. The power of qi and blood of extreme yang was like a blazing sun, naturally suppressing the spirits of the dead. As long as they came close, they would feel as if they had been splashed with boiling oil. Smoke would rise from their bodies, and they would scream and wail incessantly. Specters were sent tumbling away. Looking down from the skies, one could see a clear white line appearing from the center of the great tomb and rapidly extending outwards. The so-called Great City deep within the sea mausoleum was the entire great tomb, and the long streets were the alleys of the tomb. The densely packed residences and shops were the burial grounds of those who had been buried here. The sea folk that passed through the streets all turned to look at the wildly running Chinyu. With a roar, they revealed their true appearances and joined the army of specters. Stay here. Suffer with us. You cannot escape. Chinyu didn't care about these howls at all. As he ran forwards, whenever his path was blocked, he would lift his hand and punch out. It was said that strength could defeat all methods. Although this wasn't too appropriate, this was the truth. No matter how many specters blocked his way, he would send them flying with a single punch. Moments later, the entrance to the great tomb appeared in sight. The sea folk that were entering and exiting the city all revealed shocked expressions. As if they didn't know what was happening in the city, they panicked and cried out in alarm as they fled in all directions. An old man tightly grabbed onto two children, but he was soon washed away by the flow of people. The two children cried out in panic, tears streaming down their faces. Chinyu wildly ran forwards. He frowned and flicked his sleeves, pulling the two children to his side as he rushed towards the exit. At this time, two sea folk children, one male and one female, suddenly looked up and strangely smiled. One's eyes turned pale white, and the other's eyes turned pitch black. Their bodies directly disintegrated, turning into black and white gases that howled into Chinyu's body. At the city gate, the panicked sea folk all stopped. They laughed and turned into fog before vanishing. Only the old man remained. He looked at Chinyu with an indifferent expression. I said that you cannot escape. Chinyu frowned, a pained expression on his face. With a stuffy cough, his body slumped to the ground. The moment he touched the ground, his palms slammed against the ground, and he shot towards the old man like an arrow. Humph! The old man coldly sneered. But at this time, his body stiffened. That brief moment was enough for Yu to escape. He slapped the old man away and flew towards the city gate. The moment he entered the city gate, he heard a shrill roar in his ears. The city gate suddenly snapped shut. How was this a city gate? It was clearly the head of a horrifying specter that drilled out from the ground and stood upright. Ding, ding, ding. Crisp and dense ringing sounds spread out from the mouth and nose of this terrifying specter. It wildly tumbled about, causing the ground to boil with it. Bang! The giant head exploded. Yu shot into the skies and flew out of the great tomb. The old man's angry and resentful voice drilled into his ears like the roars of a demon. You are my prey. Don't think you can escape from here. Bang! Chapter 595. The skies grew increasingly dark. When all the specters in the great tomb were swallowed up by the bone dragon, its body was completely submerged in darkness. Black energy tumbled about. A 100,000-foot large face emerged from within, its crimson eyes staring at Yu. I will make sure you never transcend for 10,000 generations. Yu had a calm expression. Perhaps your majesty can do it, but I must apologize. Your true opponent today is not me. He took a step back. The skies behind him lit up, casting a shadow on the ground. But now this shadow didn't. As Yu moved, it flowed like water, stretching out Undying's figure. His face was blank without any facial features. But the feeling he gave off was that he was earnestly staring at the giant face that appeared in the black energy in the skies. For some unknown reason, the giant face felt a great sense of unease beneath this gaze. This feeling left it incomparably angry. It roared out, "Who are you?" Undying's voice echoed out. Who I am isn't important. What is important is that you took something that shouldn't be yours. Now it's time for you to pay the price. The giant face fiercely shivered. Its crimson eyes revealed clear fear. It opened its mouth and monstrous specter aura gathered, condensing into a black sphere. Then it was about to disappear into the black energy. It actually wanted to run away. Undying looked up at the terrifying specter strength bead that came crashing down from the heavens. He lifted a hand and pointed at the void. The bead violently trembled before collapsing and dissipating. His fingers danced about, drawing in the air. A rune that flickered with a faint light appeared, and a terrifying sealing power erupted. No! The giant face screamed in panic. It was forcefully pulled out from the black energy. No matter how much it struggled, it couldn't avoid falling down. It shrank little by little until it was finally sealed within the palm-sized rune. The rune violently trembled and faded away. A pitch-black bead fell into Undying's hand. It was translucent, and one could clearly see countless black clouds tumbling within. A giant face with a cruel and ruthless expression struggled left and right, but it couldn't escape. Yu revealed a look of surprise. Although he believed that Undying wouldn't joke around with something like this, the subduing process still surpassed his imagination. A light rune had suppressed the ancestor of the sea race that had swallowed millions of specters, causing its strength to soar. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. You took something that shouldn't have been yours. After thinking about it carefully, this sentence seemed to contain countless pieces of information, causing one's thoughts to run wild. He looked up at the great necropolis and saw that it was completely clean. Not a single specter of the dead could be seen, and the black clouds in the sky were dispersing. Undying lifted a hand and pressed the pitch-black bead between his eyebrows. It directly fused into it. He turned to face Yu, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Master, I have indeed thought of something, but it is only an incomplete fragment. Once I understand everything, I will tell you." Yu nodded. "There's no need to think too much about it. We've experienced many life and death situations together. If I didn't believe in you, I wouldn't have lived until now." He smiled. "Let's go. Once we find the divine stone, this matter will be concluded." He walked towards the great tomb first. Undying stood behind him, watching his back. After several breaths of time, he followed. All the specters were sealed away, and the great tomb revealed its original appearance. Chinyu soon found the traces left behind by the falling divine stone. Following several broken tombs, Chinyu arrived at the edge of the main tomb, underneath a giant stone pillar. He found the divine stone that fell from the heavens. The edges were sharp and there were clear cracks on them. Its surface was crystalline, as if it were some sort of jade formed after being burned at high temperature. What was even more mysterious was that there were strange fluctuations of strength within this divine stone. It constantly released and restrained a strange purple light, as if it were breathing. But what Chinyu paid more attention to now wasn't this divine stone, but the stone pillar that had been smashed by it and cracked. The surface of a stone pillar was engraved with countless runes. They were chaotic, and it was impossible to see how deep they were, but if one stared at them for a long time, they would feel as if they were alive. It was like a giant spider web that wanted to imprison one's soul. Chinyu's heart shook, and he suddenly regained his composure. He looked away, his complexion dignified. This stone pillar was indeed strange. Undying's voice echoed out. I also have an impression of this stone pillar. It is only an imitation. It seems that the suppressed sea folk ancestor once saw the true stone pillar. He pointed at the divine stone. This object contains a great amount of energy. When it smashed into the stone pillar, it was damaged. This is why the sea folk ancestor specter had the extravagant hope of leaving this place, and also why Master experienced such a thing. The stone pillar has an absolute suppressive strength toward specters. Even if they know that the divine stone is here, they cannot approach it at all. No matter how good the divine stone is, they can only look at it. His words were filled with ridicule. These sea folk specters have been bragging all this time, saying that the divine stone that fell from the heavens was something that only their king had the qualifications to possess. Chinyu smiled. It didn't matter if they were bragging or not. He had already been suppressed to the left and right. Although he didn't know what that black sphere was, he could tell from Undying's attitude that these specters wouldn't have a good ending. Although he didn't sense anything wrong with this divine stone, Chinyu was still careful. He gathered a mass of light in his palm and picked it up from the ground. It was extremely heavy. Although it was only the size of a palm, its weight was astonishing. It was at least several thousand genes. He carefully probed with his divine sense. After determining that there weren't any unknown dangers hidden within this divine stone, Chinyu scattered the light and truly touched it. Although Chinyu didn't covet this divine stone, now that it fell into his hand, he couldn't help but feel a bit curious. Just what sort of lucky chance was hidden in this thing that all the various influences in the land of divinity and demons, and even the sea folk, would send people to compete for it? Chinyu immediately discovered that there were 6 other auras that resonated with the divine stone in his hand. It seemed that when the divine stone fell from the heavens, it had split into 7 parts and scattered around. Suddenly, of the 6 auras that Chinyu sensed, one of them rapidly weakened until it vanished from sight. Following, there was a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. Chinyu stared blankly at the divine stone in his hand. The purple light shined slower and slower until it completely faded away, as if it had lost all vitality. Chinyu was suddenly enlightened. Someone had comprehended the good fortune contained within the divine stone and obtained its strength. Although it had split into 7 parts, the auras of the divine stone were still connected together. Once one of them recognized a master, the strength of the other divine stones was taken back. Chinyu's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but frown. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but his complexion was strange. It wasn't because the divine stone had turned into trash as soon as he obtained it, but because the aura of the divine stone that had taken away all of its strength was actually very familiar. It was an illusion. Chinyu carefully thought about it, and his complexion became increasingly strange. He compared it to the approximate position of the last divine stone and finally couldn't help but laugh. The divine stone that fell from the heavens actually chose this bastard. Was it blind? Undying tilted his head, puzzled. Chinyu weighed the divine stone in his hand. The good fortune contained within this thing has already been taken away. Unfortunately, that fellow and I have known each other for many years. He shook his head, a helpless look on his face. He wanted to return to the land of divinity and demons as soon as possible, but now it seemed there would be more complications. Chinyu sighed. He wasn't prepared to say anything more. He turned and walked away. Let's go. We might really be stirring up trouble after this. From the start, he had no choice but to help the sea folk. Now, he feared he would have to directly interfere. Things didn't turn out as he wished. Undying didn't leave. Master, the things buried here are very rich. Chinyu stiffened. This isn't too good. After all, these are things buried with their ancestors. Undying's voice didn't rise or fall. We've already cleared out the entire sea spirit. Chinyu was enraged. Isn't this all for you? Whatever, since you all ate to your heart's content. I can't come here for nothing. The ancestral specters had all been taken away, so what else did he have to worry about? He could do whatever he wanted. After putting down the burden in his heart, Chinyu was immediately in high spirits. The sea sovereign's treasury was indeed beneath his eyes, but there were many good things buried here. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.